Chapter 3694. Li Jingming knew that if he hesitated any longer, he would be killed in one move. Therefore, he could only reveal everything about himself before Lin Yi took action. That way, he might still have a chance of survival. That's right. Boss Lin Yi, you're from the secular world, so you probably don't know much about the local affairs on Heaven's Stage Island. I wonder if you've heard of the Qiushui Villa massacre 16 years ago. Li Jingming stared at Lin Yi's expression and asked. Lin Yi's expression changed slightly. You mean Qiushui Villa in Qiushui Town on the North Island? I've heard a little about it. When he was chatting with senior brother Ku Bai and the others, they often talked about the local customs and practices of Heaven Stage Island. One of the things that left the deepest impression on him was the massacre of the Qiushui Villa that senior brother Ku Bai mentioned 2 days ago while they were drinking. This incident happened 16 years ago. At that time, Qiushui Town was still one of the few big towns on the island. Among them, Qiushui Villa was the most powerful one. It was said that at its peak, even the higher-ups of the 3 major pavilions had to personally prepare lavish gifts for the old master of Qiushui Villa to celebrate his birthday. At that time, looking at the entire Heaven Stage Island's North Island, apart from the 3 pavilions, Qiushui Villa was undoubtedly one of the top families and forces in the North Island. However, such a colossus in the eyes of countless people had collapsed overnight at its most glorious time. There were more than 1,500 people in the Qiushui Manor. From the head of the family to the servants, all of them were killed. Not a single person was left alive. The luxurious manor that occupied hundreds of acres of land was also burned to the ground overnight. And this was the legendary Qiushui Villa massacre case that caused a sensation. After the incident, the 3 major pavilions were shocked. In order to investigate the truth and arrest the real culprit, they did not hesitate to send out the top forces of the law enforcement hall. However, after several months of investigation, they found nothing in the end. The case was left unsettled. No one knew who the real culprit was, nor did they know why he had annihilated the entire Qiushui Manor in a single night. As time passed, people would often bring up this shocking tragedy as a topic of conversation, but that was all there was to it. Li Jingming looked at Lin Yi with a burning gaze and said in a choked voice, "My name isn't Li Jingming, it's just an alias to deceive others. My real name is Qiu Jiming, and my father was the Qiushui Manor's patriarch, Qiu Jingtang. He was the only survivor among the 1,541 people in the Qiushui Manor. So, the only reason I'm alive is to take revenge. Before that, I absolutely cannot die." Lin Yi was stunned. He really didn't expect that Li Jingming was carrying such a deep blood feud. No wonder he felt an inexplicable sense of heaviness whenever he saw this person. He had thought that it was because he was scheming. Who would have thought that the source of all this was the resentment of 1,540 people? I understand. I deeply sympathize with your tragic experience, but that's all. Lin Yi nodded, but the murderous intent in his eyes didn't diminish. The reason was simple. No matter how deep the blood feud Li Jingming was carrying, what did it have to do with Lin Yi? Was it because the other party had not taken revenge? Was that why he couldn't bear to let him go? Lin Yi, who had fought his way up from the secular world, had seen many sinister people's hearts. He wouldn't be so easily soft-hearted. In the world of cultivation, where the strong preyed on the weak. When one's life was in the hands of others, it was obviously impossible to rely on sympathy to survive. At the very least, one had to show the value of living. This was an obvious truth that Lin Yi understood, and so did Li Jingming. Boss Lin Yi, I'm not telling you this to gain sympathy. I'm just telling you the reason why I must live. Li Jingming's expression became calm again. He paused and said, "If you let me live today, I can serve you from now on. I'll go through fire and water for you without any second thoughts. I can even be your spy and monitor every move of Meng Jueguang's group. This is the biggest bargaining chip I can think of. If Boss Lin Yi still doesn't believe me, then I have nothing else to say." Spy for me? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and pinched his chin. I can consider that. According to his plan, even though he was now at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, he still had to hide in the welcoming pavilion to cultivate and increase his strength for a period of time. His biggest problem in the welcoming pavilion was Meng Jueguang's group. Although with his current strength, Meng Jueguang's group would find it difficult to do anything to him, if they secretly thought of a bunch of dirty tricks, it would be more or less troublesome for Lin Yi. On the other hand, if he could plant a mole in this group of people, then everything would be different. Once any so-called dirty tricks were seen through in advance, the effects would definitely be greatly reduced. If it was used well, it might even achieve the opposite effect and gain benefits from it. Li Jingming's suggestion just happened to scratch Lin Yi's itch. Looking at Meng Jueguang's group, a guy like Meng Tong obviously couldn't be bribed or controlled, and the other newcomers' positions were too marginal. Most of the time, they might not be able to see through Meng Jueguang's plans. In comparison, Li Jingming was the most suitable candidate to be a spy. Seeing that Lin Yi was moved, Li Jingming was instantly overjoyed. He hurriedly struck while the iron was hot and said, "It's easy to dodge a spear in the open but hard to guard against a stab in the dark. Boss Lin Yi, although your strength is strong and you don't fear any of their challenges, what if Meng Jueguang plays dirty tricks on you? After all, as a senior steward, he has much more information than you and I. If you can't see through it in advance, you might be able to avoid it once or twice, but there will always be a time when you are careless, right?" Lin Yi glanced at him and said, "That's right, but why should I believe you? Since you can betray Meng Jueguang, you can turn around and betray me, right?" Li Jingming had already expected that Lin Yi would have this concern, so he immediately took out a jade token and handed it to Lin Yi, saying, "This is the identity token of my Qiushui manor. My identity information is engraved on it. Other than the late jade carving master of Qiushui manor, no one else in the world can copy it. This is my biggest secret. Once this identity token is exposed, I will definitely die without a burial place." Lin Yi took the identity token and carefully observed it. It was made of high-quality spiritual jade. Not only was its exterior carved into the shape of a manor, but what was even more bizarre was that inside the spiritual jade, there were dozens of tiny words that were almost undetectable. They were a group of 8 birth characters, and the first row was carved with Li Jingming's original name, Qiu Jiming. Chapter 3695. This identity card can at most prove that you are a survivor of Qiushui Villa. Why would you die once it is exposed? Lin Yi asked doubtfully. Li Jingming laughed bitterly. Boss Lin Yi, you should know that this case alerted the entire law enforcement hall's strongest lineup back then, but it ended without a conclusion. With the law enforcement hall's ability, do you really think that they can't find the mastermind behind such a big case? Continue, Lin Yi said calmly. When he heard senior brother Ku Bai talk about it, he also had the same doubts. It was impossible for there to be no clues left behind to exterminate the entire Qiushui villa of 1,540 people. If the law enforcement hall really wanted to investigate, it shouldn't be difficult to find the real culprit. However, in the end, the investigation ended without a conclusion after a few months. This kind of ending was really thought-provoking. It's not that they couldn't investigate, but they didn't dare to. That's because the biggest mastermind behind the scenes is the top boss of the Elders Guild of the 3 Great Pavilions. Li Jingming gritted his teeth and looked at Lin Yi. Boss Lin Yi, you must be wondering why I chose a pseudonym with the surname Li, right? The reason is very simple. It's because the biggest mastermind behind the scenes is surnamed Li. I want to use this pseudonym to constantly remind myself that I carry the blood feud of 1,540 people on my back. Lin Yi finally understood. If that was the case, once Li Jingming's identity card was exposed, he would really die a horrible death. That was because the big boss of the Elders Guild with the surname Li would definitely not allow a fish like Li Jingming to escape the net and roam freely outside. In other words, if all of this was true, Li Jingming handing over the identity card meant that his life was in the hands of Lin Yi. If he had any ulterior motives, Lin Yi could kill him at any time. Even if he had people like Meng Jueguang to protect him, it would be useless. Okay, I believe you. Lin Yi finally nodded. If he still remained indifferent after Li Jingming said this, it would be a little too much. Unless he didn't want Li Jingming to be his mole from the start. But the reality was that he needed Li Jingming to be his mole. Li Jingming also showed enough sincerity. Now that things had developed to this point, the two of them naturally hit it off. Li Jingming couldn't help but be overjoyed, but before he could feel the joy of surviving a disaster, Lin Yi casually threw the identity card back to him. He couldn't help but shiver. Boss Lin Yi, what is the meaning of this? Lin Yi smiled, not minding it. Since I already believe that you're loyal to me, I'm willing to help you. Since I already believe that you sincerely want to rely on me, then I don't need this kind of cumbersome thing. After all, if you really want to betray me in the future, then even if I have this identity card, it would be meaningless. This was the truth. Although this identity card was a fatal threat to Li Jingming, if he really thought of a way, it was still possible to get rid of this identity card's restriction. But even so, this action of Lin Yi still made Li Jingming feel flattered. He hurriedly expressed his loyalty. Thank you for Boss Lin Yi's trust. I, Li Jingming, swear to the heavens that no matter what happens in the future, I won't dare to have the slightest bit of disloyalty. If I violate this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy me. Hee hee. I don't believe in oaths. I only believe in my own strength. I'll say the ugly words first. In the future, if you have any disloyalty, I can easily take your life. When that time comes, no one can save you. Do you understand? As he spoke, Lin Yi's imposing manner as a peak early-stage foundation establishment expert was completely released. The entire cave trembled slightly. Li Jingming hurriedly prostrated on the ground. I understand. Okay, you can get up. Lin Yi nodded lightly. Yes. Li Jingming immediately got up nimbly. Although his injuries weren't light, Lin Yi didn't use any martial arts when he beat him. At this time, he couldn't even stand up. Lin Yi thought for a while and ordered, when you go back later, report to Meng Jueguang that I'm now in the early stage of foundation establishment. Do you understand what I mean? Li Jingming was stunned. He thought about the key points in his mind and quickly understood Lin Yi's meaning. He nodded. I understand. If he went back this time and reported to Meng Jueguang that Lin Yi was still in heaven stage great perfection and hadn't succeeded in foundation establishment, although this was the best way to hide his strength in the short term, it would be easy to expose flaws in the following ranking competition. Instead, it was better to reveal a little bit of Lin Yi's strength to Meng Jueguang in advance. This way, he wouldn't reveal Lin Yi's trump card. At the same time, he could also gain people's trust. Only then could he work as an inside man for a long time. Then, Boss Lin Yi, I'll leave first. Li Jingming glanced at Lin Yi. He had already been in the cave for a while. If he stayed here for too long, it would be easy to arouse suspicion. Wait a minute. Lin Yi suddenly stopped him and handed over a piece of spiritual jade. Didn't you say you wanted to exchange spiritual jades with me? After all, you came in with this excuse. If you go back empty-handed, Meng Jueguang and the others will still have to question you, right? This. Li Jingming couldn't help but be a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a long time, he stammered, Boss Lin Yi, there's something I have to tell you. You must be mentally prepared. You must hold on later. Lin Yi saw his expression and already guessed what he was going to say. He couldn't help but laugh. All right, just say it. That before, didn't a lot of people come to exchange spiritual jades with you? In fact, Meng Jueguang gave us a pile of waste jades and asked us to use them to cheat you of your good jades. In other words, you used a dozen good jades to exchange for a pile of worthless waste jades. You were cheated by Meng Jueguang. Li Jingming said awkwardly. In fact, he had always been very puzzled about this matter. In his opinion, with Lin Yi's shrewdness, how could he not be able to distinguish good jades and waste jades? Moreover, he was cheated by these people using the same excuse again and again. Even when he deliberately exposed a few flaws, Lin Yi still didn't have the slightest reaction. Lin Yi chuckled and said, "I know. I knew this was a scam from the beginning." "Huh? Then why did you?" Li Jingming was dumbfounded. How could there be someone who knew that it was a scam, but still cooperated and fell for it? Lin Yi smiled faintly. "I have a special use for collecting waste jades. In comparison, I don't rely much on good jades. So I'm happy to cooperate with you. I can't wait for you to give me more waste jades." Chapter 3696. Lin Yi smiled but didn't say anything. He didn't intend to explain in detail. After all, Li Jingming hadn't been with them for long. It was better to keep this kind of thing a little mysterious. After exchanging 3 pieces of useless jade with Lin Yi for a piece of good jade, Li Jingming turned around and left. Lin Yi's voice came from behind. "If Meng Jueguang finds anything unusual, tell me in advance. It's okay even if you can't be a mole. I'll cover for you. I won't let you suffer any losses." "Okay." Li Jingming's heart warmed and he nodded heavily. The moment he stepped out of Lin Yi's cave, he suddenly felt that even though today's trip was extremely dangerous, it was very meaningful. It was even enough to change the course of his life. Although he had no choice but to rely on Lin Yi, it was also a kind of release for him, who had suffered under Meng Jueguang. After all, no matter how he looked at it, boss Lin Yi was much more reliable than a wretched small fry like Meng Jueguang. From today onwards, I, Li Jingming, am also on Lin Yi's side. Looking at Li Jingming's back view as he left, Lin Yi pinched his chin thoughtfully. Even he didn't expect things to develop to this stage so suddenly. If Li Jingming hadn't offered to be a mole, there might have been another corpse in the cave. Li Jingming was forced to surrender. Although he took the initiative to reveal his biggest secret in order to give others a handle, he didn't go into details. For example, why Qiushui Villa was destroyed and why he, the son of the important family leader, was able to escape. Also, why did he carry his identity token with him if it was a fatal weakness? If Lin Yi really wanted to dig deeper, he could probably dig out many secrets from Li Jingming. It might even involve the big secret of Qiushui Villa. After all, it was something that the elders would not hesitate to go to war for. Once the reason was dug out, it would definitely be a big deal. However, just like how Lin Yi didn't want to reveal his secrets to others, it was understandable that Li Jingming didn't say anything about his family's secrets. In the end, Lin Yi didn't care how big of a secret Li Jingming was hiding. As long as Li Jingming didn't betray him and did his job as a mole, that was enough. If Li Jingming really did betray him, it would be like what he said just now. With his strength, it would be easy for him to take Li Jingming's life. He didn't need to hold anything against him at all. Lin Yi believed that Li Jingming wouldn't betray him, at least not in a short period of time. It wasn't wishful thinking that he believed Li Jingming's so-called loyalty. In the cultivation world that was full of deceit, as long as the temptation was big enough, anyone could throw away their principles at any time. Li Jingming was no exception. The reason why Lin Yi was so sure was that he believed that Li Jingming was rational and smart enough. Any smart guy would always be able to recognize the reality and know what was the best choice for him. After leaving Lin Yi's cave abode, Li Jingming was immediately called away by the people who had been waiting there. However, he wasn't called to Meng Tong's cave abode number 15 at the foot of the mountain, but to Meng Jueguang's cave abode on the opposite mountain. As soon as he stepped into the cave abode, Li Jingming couldn't help but be stunned when he saw the familiar faces inside. It wasn't just Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong who were waiting here. There were also Kang Mingming and Zhong Pingliang from Soaring Pavilion. What surprised him the most was that even Su Lingchong, young Master Su, was actually among them. Li Jingming couldn't help but smile secretly. This lineup was simply the most obvious anti-Lin Yi alliance of Yingxin Pavilion. Seeing Li Jingming coming in and seeing his bloody and embarrassing appearance, everyone waiting here was shocked. Wasn't it just to test Lin Yi's strength? It wasn't like he was going to fight to the death with Lin Yi. Was there a need to be so horrifying? Fuck. Lin Yi beat the shit out of you. Why are you so stupid? It's just a test. Do you have to fight to the death with him? Don't you know how to use your brain? Meng Tong cried out in surprise. He was gloating, but in his heart, he was glad. If he hadn't been quick-witted and pushed the task to Li Jingming, he would be the one in this miserable state now. I'm so fucking quick-witted. Li Jingming rolled his eyes helplessly. If he didn't rely on Lin Yi, he would probably be pissed off by Meng Tong now. He actually chose this kind of trash as a teammate. Now that he thought about it, he must have been blind. Shut the fuck up. Meng Jueguang glared at Meng Tong. If he allowed this guy to continue making sarcastic remarks, it would probably chill Li Jingming's heart. In the future, Li Jingming wouldn't work so hard for him anymore. Turning his head, Meng Jueguang pretended to be gentle and said, "How is it? What is Lin Yi's strength now?" Li Jingming was speechless again. If it was any other normal person, the first thing they would ask at this time would be whether his injury was serious or not. But this fucking Meng Jueguang didn't care about his life at all. He didn't even mention the promised reward of a piece of spiritual jade. At the end of the day, Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong were both cold-hearted people. Now that he thought about it, his decision to rely on Lin Yi was simply the wisest decision he made since he entered the welcome pavilion. After slightly adjusting his breathing, Li Jingming replied, "Senior Meng, that Lin Yi has indeed succeeded in building his foundation. He is now an expert in the early stage of building his foundation. I am no match for him at all. If it wasn't for him being afraid of causing a scene that would get out of hand, I'm afraid I would have been killed by him in one move just now." What? That guy has really succeeded in building his foundation? Are you sure you didn't see wrongly? Meng Jueguang was shocked. Even Su Lingchong and the others found it hard to believe. Even if Lin Yi was really a cultivation genius, it was impossible for him to have a deep foundation in the secular world where the spiritual energy was thin. Moreover, he had only been in the welcome pavilion for less than a month. During this time, he didn't get many decent cultivation resources. Even his cave was the extremely rotten number 14 cave at the foot of the mountain. The only good jade he had on hand had already been swindled away by them with useless jade. How could he have succeeded in building his foundation in a month? Isn't this a little too exaggerated? If he remembered correctly, this had already broken the Welcome Pavilion's foundation building record for the past few hundred years. Chapter 3697. What's so strange about that? Wasn't I defeated by him in one move? If Lin Yi was really a foundation establishment early stage expert, trash like you should have been killed in one move. How could you come back alive? Meng Tong muttered in his heart, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. After all, this matter was too embarrassing. How could he take the initiative to expose his own scars? But if that's the case, why didn't he be ruthless to you guys during the trial? And the aura that he usually exudes is obviously only at the Heaven Stage Great Circle? Meng Jueguang still had some doubts. Instinctively, he didn't want to believe that this was the truth. Li Jingming was slightly surprised. Making these people believe that Lin Yi was now a foundation establishment early stage expert was the first order that Lin Yi gave him. As a spy who had just defected, this first mission definitely couldn't be messed up. Maybe he was just like Senior Meng guessed at that time, and he wasn't a foundation establishment early stage expert? Li Jingming thought about it and said, "What do you mean?" Meng Jueguang and the others couldn't help but be stunned. Because when I tested him just now, I felt that although he was already a foundation establishment early stage expert, his aura wasn't stable. It looked like he had just broken through not long ago. So I guessed that he might have taken the trial reward foundation establishment pill, so he just broke through. Li Jingming deliberately misled. Although Lin Yi said that he had already given the foundation establishment pill to someone else, Meng Jueguang and the others didn't know. This excuse sounded reasonable. That's right. Your conjecture is logical. Meng Jiuguang clapped his hands and said, "For a heaven stage great circle expert, although the foundation establishment pill can't guarantee a 100% success rate, it can greatly increase the success rate. In that case, this fellow Lin Yi really got lucky." After taking the foundation establishment pill, he accidentally succeeded in building his foundation. Hearing him say that, Su Lingchong and the others came to a realization. The foundation establishment pill was a very precious thing to any heaven stage great perfection expert. For the sake of stability, the vast majority of people would first save up foundation building pills even if they obtained them. They would do their best to raise their strength to the limit where they could not break through, and only then would they take them. Only then would they be able to maximize their chances of successfully building their foundation. However, there were also some courageous people who, after obtaining the foundation building pill, would impatiently consume it. Although their success rate would be far inferior to the first group of people, they would still have a certain chance of successfully reaching foundation building. From Meng Jiuguang's perspective, Lin Yi was obviously the second kind of person who had gotten lucky. For everyone present, compared to Lin Yi, this guy relied on his own strength to build the foundation. Obviously, the latter speculation was more convincing. Did he really think that he could reach the foundation establishment stage by relying on his own strength? How could Lin Yi, a country bumpkin from the secular world, do something that even young Master Su like Su Lingchong couldn't do? Bullshit. But, no matter what, we can already confirm that Lin Yi is already an early-stage foundation building expert. Ninth cousin, then what should I do? The ranking competition is in another day. Meng Tong couldn't help but say anxiously. Although Lin Yi's success in building his foundation was not good news to Su Lingchong and Meng Jiuguang, it wasn't a direct threat. However, Meng Tong was different. Not only was he the biggest competitor among the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers with Lin Yi, he was also defeated by Lin Yi in one move on the first day. He still had an arranged match with Lin Yi in the ranking competition. Although he obtained second place in the trial and also held a foundation establishment pill in his hand, he didn't dare to rashly consume it. Otherwise, if he failed to break through to foundation building this time, not only would he waste the precious foundation establishment pill. Moreover, because of the side effects of the foundation establishment pill, it would also cause the difficulty of breaking through to foundation building the next time. If that happened, he, Meng Tong, might not have the chance to break through to foundation building in this lifetime. If that happened, he would really not be able to find a grave even if he cried. It's all your own fault for being useless. You clearly had a foundation establishment pill, but you didn't dare to eat it. Now that Lin Yi took the initiative. Meng Jiuguang glared at him unhappily, but he also understood Meng Tong's concerns. After all, if he was in Meng Tong's position, he also wouldn't dare to easily consume it. But ninth cousin, didn't you also say that in my current state, the success rate of taking the foundation establishment pill is less than 30%? How could I dare to eat it? Meng Tong said with a sullen face. Adding the foundation establishment pill, the success rate was less than 30%. This really couldn't be blamed on him being timid. Otherwise, with his personality of being in the limelight, it would be strange if he didn't have the chance to break the Welcome Pavilion's foundation establishment record and even leave his name in the history books. But then again, even if there wasn't a special case like Lin Yi this year, the newcomers would still be able to break the Welcome Pavilion's foundation establishment record. The reason was simple. In the past, people like Zhang Liju didn't have such a ridiculous reward like the foundation establishment pill. Other than the cave and spirit jade, they could only rely on their own hard work. If they wanted to foundation establishment, they could only rely on their own talent and hard work. And in recent years, because of Zhang Liju's intentional care, the resources of the 3 pavilions on the North Island were more than doubled. And because of this, the reward like the foundation establishment pill fell into the hands of the newcomers. Otherwise, even if the newcomers had the chance to get the foundation establishment pill, they would have to wait until the last month. How could there be such a good treatment like the foundation establishment pill in the first month? At the end of the day, they were able to get the foundation establishment pill so quickly because of Zhang Liju, the previous foundation establishment record holder. However, in the past, when they didn't have the foundation establishment pill, they could only look at it and sigh. Now that they had the foundation establishment pill, they had to worry about when to use it. Meng Tong's words were exactly what Kang Mingming and Zhong Pingliang were worried about. Don't forget that they each had a foundation establishment pill in their hands, but because of the same concerns as Meng Tong, they didn't dare to use it. Originally, if everyone was only sky perfection, it wouldn't matter much if they saved up the foundation establishment pill, but now that there was a precedent like Lin Yi, the pressure was instantly on their heads. One had to know that the ranking competition was very different from the newcomers' test. This time, the newcomers of the three pavilions were going to do it together. If they were still sky perfection, and they had to face Lin Yi, who was at the early phase of foundation establishment, then the situation wouldn't be optimistic. Chapter 3698. For a moment, the whole place was dead silent. Even a young master like Su Lingchong was helpless when faced with Lin Yi, who suddenly became a foundation establishment realm master. Kang Mingming hesitated for a moment and suddenly said, "Master Su, I heard that there's a type of foundation establishment elixir that can greatly increase the success rate of foundation establishment." Su Lingchong looked at him and nodded, "That's right. If you take the foundation establishment elixir in your current state, the success rate is only 30%. But if it's combined with the foundation establishment elixir, the success rate will be at least 70%. If it's a supreme grade foundation establishment elixir, the success rate can even reach 90%. However, this elixir has a short shelf life. Once it's made, it must be consumed within a day. That's why it's hard to find in the market. Most of the time, you can't buy it even if you want to. You have to go through special channels." Kang Mingming and the others looked at each other, their eyes burning with passion. A 30% success rate wasn't enough, but if it was above 70%, it would be much more reliable. Moreover, if it was a supreme grade foundation establishment elixir, the success rate could reach 90%. Then, with Master Su's background and connections, it shouldn't be hard to get this elixir, right? Kang Mingming said carefully, "Master Su, you know that we have a huge grudge against Lin Yi. If we don't do anything these 2 days, we might embarrass you in the ranking competition when we face Lin Yi, who is at the early stage of foundation establishment realm." Su Lingchong thought for a moment and looked at the hopeful Kang Mingming and the others. "How about this? I'll make a trip to the alchemy hall tomorrow and ask them for some foundation establishment elixir with my name." "Thank you, Master Su." Kang Mingming was overjoyed. Zhong Pingliang and Meng Tong also thanked him profusely. Su Lingchong glanced at Meng Tong. Foundation establishment elixir wasn't a common item. Originally, he only wanted to give it to Kang Mingming and Zhong Pingliang. After all, these two people were his direct subordinates, and Meng Tong was at most an outsider. How could he be qualified to receive the same treatment as Kang Mingming? However, on second thought, his main purpose for appearing here today was to deal with Lin Yi, and Meng Tong could be considered as cannon fodder at the front line. If this guy's strength was too weak, he would be bullied by Lin Yi too much. Let's just treat it as letting him off easy this time. After all, it's just a small matter in passing. Li Zhengming watched all of this with the cold eyes of a bystander. In his heart, he thought that Meng Tong was really lucky this time. However, he was not envious of this kind of luck. His priority now was to keep a low profile. If he succeeded in building his foundation too early, it would be easy to attract attention. On the contrary, it was not a good thing. What's more, he came from a prestigious family. As long as he had enough time, it wouldn't be difficult for him to succeed in building his foundation with his own strength. Compared to these people in front of him who took the foundation establishment elixir, although it looked enviable. Compared to the foundation establishment masters who relied on their own strength to break through, there was a natural gap in strength. It was not the best choice. However, if Su Lingchong really got them the foundation establishment elixir, then he had to inform boss Lin Yi in advance. Otherwise, even if Boss Lin Yi was already a master at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, he would suddenly encounter these 3 early-stage foundation establishment masters like Kang Mingming. He was afraid that he would still be caught unprepared. What Li Jingming didn't know was that even if he didn't inform Lin Yi would still be able to receive the news in advance. After all, other than him, Lin Yi still had Zhong Pingliang, the spy he had planted long ago. After being praised by Kang Mingming and the others, Su Lingchong changed the topic. Actually, to this young master, it doesn't matter what the strength of that kid Lin Yi is. Even if he's a master at the early stage of foundation establishment, in this young master's eyes, he's still just an insignificant ant. However, in this trial, I discovered a very bad sign. This kid who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth has already started to touch my bottom line. What sign? Meng Jueguang and the others all pricked up their ears. Su Lingchong glanced at them. Haven't you guys realized that since who knows when this kid has actually started to form a relationship with little junior sister Shangguan Laner? Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong heard this and immediately looked at each other. The 2 of them had the most say in this matter. For Lin Yi to be able to get to know Shangguan Laner, the 2 of them could be considered to have played a huge role. However, they didn't dare to tell this to Su Lingchong. What if this young master Su took his anger out on them? It was wiser to pretend that they didn't know anything. Su Lingchong's face was gloomy as he continued, I don't need to say more about Shangguan Laner's identity. Although it's normal for a little princess of noble birth like her to be curious about a commoner like Lin Yi, and there's no lack of stories of a fair, rich, and beautiful woman falling in love with a poor man, I absolutely won't allow this kind of thing to happen to Shangguan Laner. She's mine. Other than me, no one else can touch her. This was the main reason why he brought people to look for Meng Jueguang today. Otherwise, if it was just to deal with Lin Yi, there was no need for him to show himself. He only needed to let someone pass a message to everyone present. Young Master Su's words are indeed very dangerous. Lin Yi is famous for being a womanizer when he was in the secular world. Take the 7 inheritors who were responsible for transporting us for example. Every one of them is a great beauty, but every one of them is entangled with Lin Yi. Miss Shangguan is a little girl who doesn't know the ways of the world. Once this guy sets his eyes on her, she'll easily fall into his hands. At that time, if he really becomes the son-in-law of the Shangguan family, it'll be big trouble. Kang Mingming added oil to the fire. And with every sentence that Kang Mingming said, Su Lingchong's face became more gloomy. When he finished speaking, Su Lingchong's face was already as gloomy as water, and there was even a piercingly cold murderous intention. Before this, although Lin Yi openly went against him, he had always treated Lin Yi as an ant and disdained him. But this time, the matter involved Shanghai Laner, who he had long determined to be his exclusive property, and the nature was completely different. So, we must nip this in the bud. Su Lingchong gritted his teeth and said, we must find a way to make Lan hate Lin Yi. If we can't do this, then we can only take a risk and think of a way to kill Lin Yi. Everyone present shuddered at the same time. This time, young Master Su really had the intention to kill. Young Master Su, although it's easier to kill Lin Yi directly, it's too risky. It's better to think of other ways unless it's absolutely necessary. Zhong Pingliang hurriedly reminded. Chapter 3699. With Su Lingchong's power, if he really wanted to do this, even if Zhong Pingliang had confidence in Lin Yi, he couldn't guarantee that Lin Yi could escape. After all, it was easy for Su Lingchong to mobilize a few masters who were stronger than Lin Yi. Li Jingming, who was standing silently on the side, looked at Zhong Pingliang with some surprise. His worries were the same as Zhong Pingliang's, but with his status, he was not qualified to speak in front of Su Lingchong. He didn't expect Zhong Pingliang to do it for him. At this time, Meng Jueguang also echoed, what Brother Zhong said makes sense. The 3 pavilions have always attached great importance to newcomers. If a newcomer is killed, it is likely to directly alarm the higher-ups of the law enforcement hall. No matter how clean our hands and feet are, I'm afraid there will be traces left, and we will get into trouble. Meng Jiuguang's words were actually purely for his own consideration. After all, Su Lingchong said this in front of several people present. If he really wanted to assassinate Lin Yi, he, Meng Jiuguang, would definitely not be able to stay out of it. At that time, the law enforcement hall might not touch Su Lingchong, but he would definitely be thrown out as a scapegoat, and then he would die without a burial place. Don't worry, I won't do this unless I have no other choice. So, all of you, think carefully about how to make little sister Lan hate Lin Yi. Su Lingchong glanced at these people and said. Although he had a strong background, assassinating a newcomer was not only a person's life, but also related to the image of the 3 pavilions in the north. If it really reached that point, even if his grandfather wanted to protect him, he was afraid that he would have to spend a lot of effort. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he, Master Su, would not do such a stupid thing. Everyone frowned and thought hard for a while, and the most shrewd Meng Jiuguang suddenly clapped and said, I got it. I thought of a good way. Speak quickly. Su Lingchong hurriedly urged. Shengguan Lan'er was the official wife candidate he had planned for a long time. Although he hadn't gotten her yet, how could he tolerate being in a relationship with such a shady person like Lin Yi? He must nip this in the bud as soon as possible. Young Master Su, you just said that a noble princess like Miss Shengguan would be interested in a commoner like Lin Yi. It's because she has never come into contact with such a person, so she's curious, right? Meng Jiuguang deliberately kept her in suspense. Yes, go on. Su Lingchong nodded. As the saying goes, once a woman's curiosity is piqued, she will not be far from falling. Young Master Su, even a tall, rich, and handsome man like you could completely crush a poor man like Lin Yi, but a woman's curiosity was the key to the success of a poor man's counterattack. So, if we want to nip this danger in the bud, the key is to eliminate Miss Shengguan's curiosity. Meng Jiuguang pretended to be profound. Su Lingchong said thoughtfully, that's a little interesting. Then how do you think we can eliminate her curiosity? We can't just throw her into the commoner world, right? There's no need to go to the commoner world. If we want to eliminate Miss Shengguan's curiosity, it's actually very simple. We just need to let her see the true ugly side of this poor man, Lin Yi. Didn't junior brother Kong say that this guy was womanizing everywhere in the commoner world? We just need to let him expose his ugly side in front of Miss Shengguan, then everything will be solved. Meng Jiuguang said with a proud smile. I really didn't expect you to be so good at it, Elder Meng. What a talent. Su Lingchong couldn't help but think highly of Meng Jiuguang when he heard this. In his eyes, Meng Jiuguang was just a dispensable character. However, after listening to Meng Jiuguang's words, he suddenly realized that Meng Jiuguang was actually quite smart. After receiving Su Lingchong's praise, Meng Jiuguang was instantly elated. He had racked his brains to think of ways to hold on to this thick thigh, and now, he had finally received recognition. Then tell me, how should we make Lin Yi reveal his lecherous side in front of junior sister Lan? Su Lingchong continued to ask. Meng Jiuguang smiled slyly and immediately told him the idea that he had been brewing in his mind like he was presenting a treasure. Su Lingchong listened. He couldn't help but clap his hands and laugh. This is a brilliant plan. I'll leave this matter to you, Elder Meng. Your Blue Cloud Pavilion's Lu Bianren has already decided to get lost. After this matter is done, I'll inform the higher-ups and let you replace him as the 3rd Pavilion Master of the Welcome Pavilion. Thank you, young Master Su, for your appreciation. Meng Jiuguang was immediately overjoyed. The 3rd Pavilion Master of the Welcome Pavilion was a position that he had always dreamed of. The senior brother in charge was only at the bottom, but if he became the 3rd Pavilion Master, he would be a real high-level figure in the Welcome Pavilion. However, I'll say the ugly words first. You can only do things quickly for me. That's why I'll inform the higher-ups on your behalf. Su Lingchong paused and reminded him, also, with your qualifications, although it's not a big problem for you to take over the position of the 3rd Pavilion Master, your strength at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm is too weak. You need to at least reach the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm. If you can't reach this hard threshold, it'll be useless no matter how many people speak for you. Although Lu Bianren's matter is already a foregone conclusion, I'm afraid it'll still be a few months before he's actually kicked out. This period of time should be enough for you to break through. Young Master Su is right. I'll definitely do my best and definitely won't let young Master Su down. Meng Jueguang nodded repeatedly. Although the position of the third pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion did not seem to have much authority and was of little importance, due to the fact that the three great pavilions had always attached great importance to newcomers, anyone who had experience in the Welcome Pavilion would naturally enter the vision of the higher-ups. As long as they did not make any major mistakes, their future development would definitely be boundless. In fact, among the current elders of the three great pavilions, more than half of them had the experience of being the pavilion master and deputy pavilion master. This position was equivalent to an important reserve for the future high-level figures of the three great pavilions. Therefore, the appointment and removal of the pavilion master and deputy pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion had always been extremely cautious. Not only did the elders of the three great pavilions have to unify their opinions, if there was a conflict of opinion, it would even be brought up to the Elders Association for a public discussion. In this process, the connections behind one's back were naturally very important, but at the very least, there was a hard condition, and that was that one's strength must be above the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm. Otherwise, one's strength couldn't surpass the new stewards under him. Even if one sat in the position of the third pavilion master, how could he convince the masses? After that, they chatted for a while and filled in the gaps, complimenting Meng Jueguang's so-called brilliant plan until it was flawless, and only then did they disperse. What they didn't know was that there were two insiders, Zhong Pingliang and Li Jingming, here. No matter how brilliant the plan was, it was bound to be full of loopholes when used on Lin Yi. Chapter 3700. Lin Yi couldn't help but chuckle as he looked at the two reports. These people really had a lot of tricks up their sleeves. They wouldn't rest for even a second. If he hadn't planted these two spies in advance, he would have fallen into their trap. What made Lin Yi happy was that the contents of the two reports were basically the same. This proved that Li Jingming was truly doing this for him, at least for now. If he'd just been trying to bluff his way through, it'd be fake news even if the reports came to him now. Who knew? Li Jingming might have even set up a trap to lure Lin Yi into it. But now that he had the two intelligence reports, he didn't have to worry about it anymore. Pinliang and Li Jingming, without knowing each other, became each other's witnesses, and in the future, they would continue to corroborate each other. Once either of them had ulterior motives, Lin Yi would be able to sense it immediately. This was also why he was willing to accept Li Jingming. With this double insurance, he wasn't afraid of Li Jingming's retaliation at all. When the next day was bright, the cave's restriction was suddenly touched by someone. Lin Yi answered and went out, but he didn't see anyone. He only found a beautifully made letter on the stone slab at the door. The corner of Lin Yi's lips curled into a playful smile. This was exactly as the intel had said, and needless to say, this letter had to be Meng Jueguang's handwriting. Lin Yi knew that Meng Jueguang and the others were definitely watching from afar, so he immediately picked up the letter and turned around to return to his cave. He opened the letter. There were only a few sentences on it. The words were written in beautiful handwriting. If he hadn't known that this was Meng Jueguang's plan, he might have believed that it was a girl's handwriting. Little brother Lin Yi, from the first time I saw you, I couldn't get your figure out of my mind. I want to see you. I have something to say to you. Afternoon, Little Forest. See you there, Shangguan Laner. Lin Yi smiled and shook his head. There was a note on the back of the letter. My grandfather is very strict about the relationship between men and women. Destroy it immediately after seeing it. Hee, this group of people is quite thoughtful. Lin Yi could not help but laugh speechlessly. He believed that at this very moment, a similar letter should have been sent to the hands of Laner in Shangguan Laner, but the content was different. It should have been sent in his name, Lin Yi. Using the excuse that he missed the little curly bear, he invited the little curly bear to meet up in the small forest in the afternoon. And on the back of the letter, there should be a similar note. Once it was done, there would be no evidence. Meng Jiuguang's plan was actually very simple. It was to use Lin Yi's name to deceive Shangguan Laner to go to the little forest. At the same time, he would use Shangguan Laner's name to express his love to Lin Yi, create a misunderstanding, and let Lin Yi fall into the trap. In his eyes, although Lin Yi looked smart and strong at first glance, but in fact, he was only a so-so, especially when it came to the relationship between men and women. Normal people's IQ would drop. Suddenly receiving such a confession letter, and the other party was a little princess with a strong background like Shangguan Laner. If it was anyone else, they would be overjoyed and want to immediately fly to the little forest for a date. They would not pay attention to whether this letter was real or fake. Lin Yi, who was a lecherous person in Kong Ming's mouth, would not be an exception. And once Lin Yi really went to the little forest with such a happy heart, and when he saw Shangguan Laner in the little forest, if he said something inappropriate, he might even take a step further. If they were to take things a step further, things would get out of hand. With the temper of Shangguan Laner, she would definitely break up with Lin Yi when she was angry. It might even alarm her grandfather, Shanghai Tianhua. At that time, even if Lin Yi did not die, he would at least be peeled off a few layers of his skin. So, although this plan seemed simple and childish, it was tailor-made for a lecherous person like Lin Yi. It was absolutely fatal. And the dangerous part was, once this plan succeeded, no matter how strong Lin Yi's strength was, it would be useless, because Shangguan Laner did not care about his strength at all. If she was really annoyed, not to mention that Lin Yi was just a master in the early stage of foundation establishment, even if he was at the peak of the late stage of foundation establishment, it would be useless. At that time, he would still die without a burial place. However, although this plan was tailor-made for Lin Yi, and Meng Jiuguang and others had full confidence that Lin Yi would definitely take the bait, if they wanted to succeed, there were still two key points. One was that the letter could not leave any evidence. Otherwise, even if Lin Yi really took the bait and threw the letter out after the accident, it would more or less be a hidden danger. Therefore, Meng Jiuguang thought of a way to deliberately leave a note on the back. The other key point was how to trick Shangguan Laner into the grove. One must know that Shangguan Laner was not a lecherous person like Lin Yi who would easily take the bait. She was the little princess of the entire 3 pavilions, the dream goddess of countless young men. Among her suitors, there were at least 8 young masters like Su Lingchong, if not a dozen. If they confessed their love to her in the name of Lin Yi, not to mention tricking Shangguan Laner, she wouldn't even look at them. Taking 10,000 steps back, the Shangguan family had always been extremely strict. Even if she was really interested in Lin Yi, it was absolutely impossible for her to rashly come out and have a date with Lin Yi in the grove. This was originally a difficult problem that made people feel helpless, but Meng Jiuguang suddenly had a bright idea. He bypassed Shangguan Laner herself and started with the little curly bear. This matter became much easier. The little curly bear really liked Lin Yi. This was something that Meng Jiuguang and the rest had witnessed with their own eyes. Moreover, Shanghai Laner indulged the little curly bear very much. This was something that the entire 3 pavilions knew. If the letter they wrote fell into the hands of Shanghai Laner, it was equivalent to falling into the hands of the little curly bear. With the little curly bear's closeness to Lin Yi, once it heard that Lin Yi wanted to find it to play in the grove, it wouldn't be able to stop it. At that time, even if Shanghai Laner didn't want to go to the grove, it wouldn't be able to. This Meng Jiuguang, if he didn't use these crooked methods all day long, he could still be considered a talent. Lin Yi couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. Meng Jiuguang was a person with decent strength. He was also tactful and quick-witted. He also had all kinds of tricks up his sleeves. If he used his mind on the right path, he would be able to become a pillar of Blue Cloud Pavilion in the future. Unfortunately, this guy never thought of walking the right path. Chapter 3701. Grove, although a very general and vague name, in the three major pavilions, it referred to a fixed grove, located between the welcoming pavilion and the spirit jade hall. Grass, trees, water, and stones were all available, and the scenery could be said to be fresh and elegant, and it had been specially repaired. It was a good place to go. Stepping on the gravel road in a circle around the grove, Lin Yi finally saw Shanghai Laner and the little curly bear, the master and pet, in a pavilion. Woo woo. Seeing Lin Yi appear, the little curly bear immediately pounced over. As the owner, Shanghai Laner could not hold it back, and could only stand at the side sulking. Watching Lin Yi and the little curly bear play for a while, Shanghai Laner pouted and asked, "Hey, what magic did you use on Little White, making it so small?" This question was what she wanted to ask the last time in the back mountain hall, but because Lin Yi and Meng Tong were fighting for first place, she was interrupted. "Hee, you should ask this little guy this question, Mississippi." Lin Yi smiled faintly. "You think I didn't ask it? This guy only knows how to live off me while secretly helping others. After being bewitched a little, it doesn't know what's going on. I've spoiled it for so many years, in the end, it's not as close as you, an outsider." Shanghai Laner glared at the little curly bear and said angrily. Because there were very few female disciples in the three major pavilions, the little curly bear was not only her pet, but also her closest playmate since childhood. In the end, Lin Yi, who the little curly bear was closer to, suddenly appeared. This feeling was like being interfered with by a third party, not to mention how depressing it was. Woo 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 woo. The little curly bear rode on Lin Yi's shoulder and barked at Shanghai Laner. "You said that the smell on Lin Yi is very good, so you like to climb on him?" Shanghai Laner rolled her eyes speechlessly. "How dare you say that you're not a traitor? Is the smell of a grown man better than mine?" Woo woo woo. Little curly bear seemed to be arguing with something. "Really?" Shanghai Laner looked at Lin Yi from head to toe in disbelief. When Lin Yi was confused, she suddenly blinked her eyes and carefully sniffed Lin Yi's body. She whispered, "This smell is really good. I've never smelled it before." Lin Yi was speechless when he heard this. At this moment, this little girl's face was less than a centimeter away from his neck. If he moved even a little, he was afraid that she would directly kiss his neck. Could it be that the women on the heavenly island were all so open-minded? Was it really okay for them to be so close to a stranger that they had only met twice? He felt Shanghai Laner's breath on his neck. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but feel restless. He barely managed to maintain his figure, but at this time, little curly bear on his shoulder suddenly swayed. Lin Yi subconsciously wanted to catch it, and then, a tragedy happened. Both of them suddenly froze. After being stunned for a long time, Shanghai Laner suddenly screamed. She instantly retreated 2 feet away with a blushing face. She pointed at Lin Yi and stammered, Why did you move for no reason?" Lin Yi spread his hands innocently. "It wasn't me who moved just now, it was this little guy who moved." "Huh?" Shanghai Laner immediately saw little curly bear making a face at her. She suddenly felt helpless. It turned out that this little guy was playing tricks. You are not allowed to say anything about this. Otherwise, I will ask my grandpa to lock you up, pull out your tendons, peel off your skin, and throw you into the cauldron to refine pills. Do you understand?" Shanghai Laner was stunned for a moment. She immediately changed her expression and stared fiercely at Lin Yi. This was the first time she had skin contact with a boy since she was young. Moreover, she was the one who took the initiative to kiss Lin Yi. If others knew about this, she would really die of embarrassment. Yes. I will pretend that nothing happened." Lin Yi was very cooperative and nodded repeatedly. His thoughts. But he thought of Chu Mengyao. When he saw Shanghai Laner, he couldn't help but think of that Mississippi. Thinking back to the first day he went to Songshan, he also inexplicably had an indirect kiss. But at that time, Miss Chu's reaction was completely different from this Miss Shangguan. Meng Yao vomited to death, but Shanghai Laner even threatened him not to say anything. This made Lin Yi couldn't help but be in a trance. Yes, yes. It's like nothing happened. Shanghai Laner quickly responded. She immediately turned her head and glared at the little curly bear. She bared her teeth and said, "I'll deal with you when we get back." The little curly bear, on the other hand, was riding on Lin Yi's head to entertain himself. He didn't pay attention to her at all. Instead, it made Shanghai Laner unbearably angry. Although this miss was a bit Sundra, her temperament was not bad. She didn't lose her innocence and cuteness. Lin Yi looked at the scene of the master and pet quarreling and couldn't help but smile. If Shanghai Laner was really that kind of pampered miss who couldn't bear the slightest grievance, then it would be big trouble just now. If she determined that it was molestation, the consequences would be unimaginable. It was exactly what Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang wanted. In order to avoid the awkwardness, Lin Yi could only continue the previous topic and said, "Miss, actually, the reason why the little guy is so close to me is probably related to the first time I saw him, when I healed him." "You healed Little White?" Shanghai Laner was suddenly shocked, but her focus was not on why Lin Yi could heal the spiritual pet, but she hurriedly asked, "Has Little White been injured before?" "Yes, when I first saw him, he did suffer a serious injury. I didn't think much about it and healed him. That's why he is so attached to me." Lin Yi nodded and said. The little curly bear whimpered in cooperation on his neck, confirming his theory. Shanghai Laner hurriedly hugged the little curly bear and checked it up and down. After finding that there were no sequelae, she was relieved and said, "Then why didn't you say it earlier? Tell me quickly, which bastard hurt Little White?" When she was in the back mountain hall a few days ago, she actually thought about all kinds of strange things when she was looking for the little curly bear. However, because the little curly bear was also confused about the situation that day, it couldn't tell the reason at all, so she could only give up and not delve into it. "I don't know about this." Lin Yi shook his head and said. Chapter 3702. Instead of alerting the enemy by saying it now, it was better to bury a question mark in this Missy's heart first, and then burst it out at the critical moment. This way, it would have a miraculous effect. Shanghai Laner couldn't help but be a little disappointed. Even Lin Yi and the little curly bear couldn't figure out who the real murderer was. Even if she wanted to stand up for the little curly bear, she didn't know who to vent her anger on. Looking at Lin Yi, Shanghai Laner suddenly raised the corner of her mouth and said, "Seeing that you have saved Little White before, I have decided to recognize you as my junior brother. Don't call me Missy in the future, call me Little Senior Sister, do you understand?" "Huh? Little Senior Sister?" Lin Yi was dumbfounded and looked at Shanghai Laner with a strange expression. "Of course, I entered the sect earlier than you. According to the rules, shouldn't you call me Little Senior Sister?" Shanghai Laner pretended to glare at him fiercely, and then said with a proud face, "Come, little junior brother Lin Yi, call me Little Senior Sister." Damn. This chick really came up with something when she wanted to. Lin Yi was speechless for a while, but Shanghai Laner's logic was not bad, so he could only bite the bullet and said, Little Senior Sister." Shanghai Laner immediately smiled and pretended to be solemn and mature. "That's a good boy. If you encounter any trouble in the future, come to me, okay? Little Senior Sister will stand up for you." Lin Yi could only roll his eyes. If a man like him really fell to the point of relying on this chick to protect him, then he really lived for so many years in vain. But it was not good to refute on the surface, so he could only nod his head honestly. But strictly speaking, this Little Senior Sister's background was a mess, and her backing was much stronger than Su Lingchong's. It was really a rare thick thigh, and he might really be able to use it in the future. With the little curly bear as a natural bond, the two of them chatted and laughed for a while, and their relationship became much closer. After all, Shangguan Lan's identity was special, and she had almost no real friends except for the little curly bear. The others either kept a respectful distance from her, or they had ulterior motives like Su Lingchong and the others. It was utterly impossible for any true friendship to exist between them. But today, she found the feeling of a friend in Lin Yi. There was no special intention, no flattery, just a comfortable conversation. Being free and unrestrained, this feeling was really not bad. Naturally, Shanghai Laner's favorable impression of Lin Yi began to soar. As for the initial hostility, it had long disappeared. Lin Yi snickered in his heart. If Meng Jueguang and his gang knew about this situation, they would definitely be killed. Not only did they fail to sow discord, but it also brought the relationship between the two of them closer. This was simply going for wool and coming home shorn. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, before they parted, Lin Yi suddenly said, "Little senior sister, I have a request." "Say it." "Little senior sister, I will definitely help you." Shanghai Laner waved her hand heroically. Lin Yi pondered for a moment and said, "In the future, in front of others, can little senior sister deliberately pretend to hate me?" "Why?" Shanghai Laner was stunned. If it was someone else, they would be too late to be close to her. Lin Yi smiled faintly, "Let me keep you in suspense first. When the time comes, I will tell you the whole story." Shanghai Laner was after all a little girl. Seeing Lin Yi's mysterious look, she immediately became interested. "All right. Little junior brother is busy. As your little senior sister, I will definitely help you." "Thank you, little senior sister." Lin Yi did this naturally to numb Su Lingchong and the others. Otherwise, if this group of people didn't see any results, they would inevitably come up with all kinds of crooked ideas to find trouble with him again and again. Then, it would not be peaceful. He still wanted to stop for a period of time and cultivate properly. The key point was that in the information given by Zhong Pingliang and Li Jingming, they both mentioned that Shanghai Laner was Su Lingchong's reverse scale. If he was forced into a corner, it was very likely that he would take the risk and directly send people to assassinate him. That would really be troublesome. Although Lin Yi was now an expert at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment and could crush all the newcomers in the welcome pavilion, it was still not enough outside. But it was still not enough outside. What if the opponent sent an expert in the middle stage of the foundation establishment realm or even stronger? At that time, no matter how careful Lin Yi was, he might die a violent death if he was not careful. "Then I'll be leaving first." Shanghai Laner forcefully pulled the little curly bear from Lin Yi's shoulder and left after saying goodbye. Looking at her excited footsteps, she seemed to be in a good mood. But perhaps because she suddenly remembered Lin Yi's request, when she walked out of the small forest, Shanghai Laner suddenly stopped in her tracks and pretended to leave angrily. Her acting was quite decent. This little senior sister was quite pure and cute. Lin Yi looked at the girl's back and couldn't help but smile. However, although he successfully got closer to Shanghai Laner, Lin Yi didn't have the intention to use her to climb up. After all, the main reason he came to Sky Class Island was to find Zhang Liju and heal his 7 inheritor girlfriends, as well as Yu Xiaoka and Armadillo. As for relationships like this, he didn't really care about it anymore. Plus, with Lin Yi's personality, he wouldn't even think of using a girl's feelings to climb up the social ladder to achieve his goals. He definitely wouldn't do such a despicable thing. The news of Shanghai Laner and Lin Yi leaving on bad terms quickly reached Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang's ears. Su Lingchong was overjoyed, and Meng Jueguang was even more overjoyed. Obviously, their plan had succeeded. Although this plan was specially made for a pervert like Lin Yi, and Meng Jueguang was 90% sure that Lin Yi would fall for it, but now that it actually succeeded, he was still overjoyed. Don't forget that Su Lingchong had promised him beforehand that as long as this matter was done beautifully, Su Lingchong would step forward and greet the higher-ups on his behalf so that he could replace Lu Bianren's position in the future and become the new 3rd pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion. With Su Lingchong's deep background, as long as he could persuade his grandfather, Su Yuanzheng, and let Su Yuanzheng, a big shot in the Elders Association, say a few words, then no one would be able to compete with him, Meng Jueguang, for the position of 3rd Pavilion Master of the Welcoming Pavilion. As for Meng Jueguang, the only thing he had to do now was to think of a way to raise his strength to the middle phase of foundation building before Lu Bianren left, and this wasn't a difficult thing for him. Chapter 3703. As long as he had the foundation breaking pill, Meng Jueguang believed that breaking through to the middle stage of the foundation breaking stage would be a matter of course. There would not be any obstacles. At that time, he would be able to take over the position of the third pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion. Not mentioning how smug Meng Jueguang was, after Lin Yi returned to his cave, he entered the space within the jade pendant to cultivate and stabilize his strength. The night passed uneventfully. The next morning, all the newcomers gathered in the main hall. Their faces were filled with excitement and nervousness that could not be concealed. This was because from today onwards, after a month of adaptation, they would officially enter the stage. From today onwards, there would only be one theme left in the Welcome Pavilion, and that was competition. According to the rules that had been the same for the past few years, from the second month onwards, the newcomers from the 3 pavilions would begin a cruel and intense ranking competition. Every newcomer around them would become each other's competitors. They would either step on each other or be stepped on by each other. Other than that, there was no third possibility. If you were strong enough, then even if you were the most inconspicuous newcomer from the Blue Cloud Pavilion, you could still challenge the number 1 seated disciple from the Soaring Sky Pavilion and step on him. Then, you could take all the best cultivation resources for yourself. On the other hand, if your strength was too weak, then even if you were a disciple from the Soaring Sky Pavilion with a strong background, you would only be a stepping stone for others. In the following days in the Welcome Pavilion, you could only endure the worst cultivation resources. From then on, you would never be able to rise again. At the end of the day, the cultivation world had always followed the law of the jungle. Even the relatively gentle Welcome Pavilion would only follow the law of the jungle. There were no exceptions. The only consideration was that there would be some restrictions when competing with each other, so that no lives would be lost. That was all. Regarding this, after a month of adaptation, all the newcomers were already mentally prepared. Whether it was the strong or the weak, they already knew what they would face. However, when the pavilion master, Hu Yunfeng, went on stage and said his first sentence, the entire audience was in an uproar. In response to the elders' call to comprehensively improve the strength of the newcomers, from this year onwards, the Welcome Pavilion will cancel the ranking competition system. Replacing it will be a more comprehensive and fair newcomer assessment. All newcomers, please prepare yourselves. The specific assessment rules can be found on the announcement board. What? Abolish the ranking system? There was an uproar among the rookies. Many of them had been preparing for the ranking competition for the past month. Some of them had even thought of which opponents they would challenge. As for those like Meng Tong and Lin Yi who had a grudge against each other, they had already announced that they would avenge themselves in the qualifier. Who would have thought that the ranking competition, which had been the traditional mechanism of the Welcome Pavilion for the past few decades, would be cancelled? And when Hu Yunfeng ordered someone to post up the rules of the announcement that had been written long ago, there was a flurry of discussion among the rookies. Lin Yi and the others squeezed forward and glanced at it. This newcomer assessment had a total of 6 segments. The assessment involved pressure, defense, spirit herbs, spirit beasts, actual combat, and many other aspects. The assessment would last for 5 months. Points would be assessed at every stage of the assessment, and the final ranking would be based on the accumulated points. Indeed, as Hu Yunfeng had said, this newcomer assessment was much more comprehensive than the previous simple and crude ranking competition. However, there was a very important point that quickly attracted the attention of Lin Yi and the others. This newcomer assessment. The newcomers from the 3 pavilions were actually ranked separately. The top 3 of each pavilion would receive a Foundation Establishment Pill or Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill, and the 4th to 10th place would receive 3 Spirit Jades. After the 10th place, there was nothing. This reward rule, other than the reallocation of cave dwellings according to the ranking, and the top 3 being able to choose the medicinal pill, was almost the same as the newcomer assessment in the back mountain 2 days ago. Logically speaking, Just like the previous newcomer assessment, this kind of rule was a good thing for the naturally weak Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies. After all, they were generally weak. If they were to compete with the Rushing Sky Pavilion and Mysterious Pavilion rookies, they could forget about obtaining a Foundation Establishment pill or Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking pill. But don't forget, this newcomer assessment had a crucial difference compared to the newcomer assessment in the back mountain. Its ranking would directly affect the allocation of cave dwellings. According to the rules of the previous years, even if it was a new disciple from the Clear Cloud Pavilion, as long as they were strong enough, they would be able to obtain the best cultivation resources, including the cave dwelling. And for someone like Lin Yi who was strong enough, he could even obtain the cave dwelling at the peak of the mountain. However, if it was changed to this newcomer assessment, although it might be a blessing for the weak, it was equivalent to naturally erasing the chance of them surpassing the Rushing Sky Pavilion and Mysterious Pavilion rookies. In other words, for a Blue Cloud Pavilion rookie like Lin Yi, no matter how strong he was, he could no longer hope for the first cave dwelling on the mountain top. Even if he could easily crush his opponent, it would be useless. The first cave dwelling on the mountain top should belong to Rushing Sky Pavilion, and it would forever belong to Rushing Sky Pavilion. The newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion should never think of touching it. In the previous ranking competition, the newcomers of the three pavilions were all at the same starting line. What kind of cultivation resources they could obtain, it was entirely up to their own strength to fight for it. It was basically considered fair. However, this time's newcomer assessment, although there were a lot of tricks and it looked more scientific, in fact, it was naturally biased towards the newcomers of Rushing Sky Pavilion. This was the so-called fair newcomer assessment. Lin Yi couldn't help but sneer. Although he had no interest in the first cave dwelling on the mountain top, at this moment, his heart still gave birth to a sense of annoyance. This assessment is clearly biased towards the newcomers of Rushing Sky Pavilion. Even if their strength is bad, they can still sit back and enjoy the best cave dwelling without any worries. Pavilion Master Hu, do you still have the face to claim that this is fair? Xiao Hongkai suddenly shouted. He was a straightforward person who hated evil. On the first day he came to the Welcome Pavilion, he dared to question the injustice. At this time, naturally, he would not shrink back. And his doubt not only resonated with some of the newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion, but even these old men of Mysterious Pavilion also responded. Among them, Dongfang Badeo and a few others were the most indignant. The reason was very simple. Compared with the newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion who were naturally weak, these old men of Mysterious Pavilion were generally tyrannical. If they could challenge across pavilions, they had enough confidence to pull down these second-generation cultivators of Rushing Sky Pavilion. Chapter 3704. Looking at the agitated newcomers from Mysterious Pavilion and Blue Cloud Pavilion, Hu Yunfeng did not seem worried at all. Instead, he said calmly, the newcomer assessment rules were approved by the Elders Guild. If you have any objections, you can protest to the Elders Guild. I won't stop you. That one sentence caused all the newcomers to choke speechless. The Elders Guild was the existence that stood at the peak of the entire North Island. A group of newcomers who had not even reached the Foundation Establishment stage dared to protest to the Elders Guild? Even if they wanted to die, this was not the way to do it. Lin Yi shook his head helplessly. With the backing of the Elders Guild, Hu Yunfeng had nothing to fear. It could be seen that the three major pavilions were gradually being controlled by Soaring Sky Pavilion. This was indeed true. Otherwise, the assessment rules that obviously favored the newcomers from Soaring Sky Pavilion would not have been approved by the Elders Guild. After a short pause, seeing that the new disciples were silent, Hu Yunfeng nodded in satisfaction and continued, but, in order to avoid any resentment in your hearts, saying that the rules are deliberately biased towards the Soaring Sky Pavilion's new disciples, after this year's new disciple assessment, the Profound Secrets Pavilion and Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciples will have one last chance to challenge each other. As long as you win, you will be able to obtain the other's cultivation dwelling. This way, you should have nothing to say, right? The newcomers looked at each other, then nodded and gave up. However, there was still something fishy about this. For example, the newcomer assessment lasted for 5 months. In addition to the month that had already passed, by the time the assessment ended, the Soaring Sky Pavilion's newcomers would have occupied the best cave abode for half a year. This half a year was enough for them to leave the newcomers from the other 2 pavilions behind. However, having a chance to challenge was better than nothing. At least they could hope for the next half of the year. Otherwise, they would not even have a chance for the next half of the year. Looking at the newcomers who had given up, Lin Yi could not help but sigh secretly, hit with a stick and then give a date to eat. The thorny situation that was originally difficult to appease was so easily resolved. This pavilion leader Hu Yunfeng's methods could be said to be shrewd and ruthless. Hu Yunfeng had long expected this scene. He paused for a moment and said, before the official start of this newcomer assessment, "This pavilion master has something else to announce." Due to the many segments of the newcomer assessment, in addition to the 2 stewards of each of the 3 pavilions, there was a need for an additional newcomer deacon to be responsible for the calculation and announcement of the points. Of course, this task required a lot of effort and was considered a free service for everyone, so it would definitely affect the person's assessment results. Therefore, in addition to the new deacon's monthly salary, we will also give this newcomer 50 assessment points as compensation. As soon as he finished speaking, the audience immediately started discussing spiritedly. The matter of the new deacon had already been voted by the public at the beginning of last month. In the end, although Kang Mingming's votes far surpassed Zhang Lixing of the mysterious pavilion under Su Lingchong's care, it didn't exceed 2/3 of the votes. It could only be left empty for now. However, even though they were both new deacons, their previous responsibilities were only in charge of the distribution of low-level missions, and the rewards weren't that great. However, this time, the new deacon in charge of calculating the points would receive 50 assessment points as compensation in addition to their regular salary. This made all the rookies present envious. One had to know that in the 6 segments of the assessment, one could at most get 50 to 60 points in each segment. There were even a few segments where the first place could not even reach the height of 50 points. In other words, being the new deacon was equivalent to having an additional assessment segment, and this segment would naturally give him full marks. As long as there were no major problems in the 6 assessments, this was the rhythm of a guaranteed first place. All the rookies were burning with passion. They were hoping that this pie that fell from the sky would hit them, but anyone with a discerning eye could tell that this candidate had long been decided internally. As expected, Hu Yunfeng immediately said, "This position will be taken up by Kang Mingming." He was the one who obtained the first place in the previous deacon selection, and he also obtained first place in the Back Mountain trial 2 days ago in Soaring Sky Pavilion, be it prestige or strength. He is the most suitable person to take this position. Do you have any objections? If you have any, raise your hand and say it. Don't privately complain about it being manipulated behind the scenes and affect the image of our welcome pavilion. All the rookies were immediately awakened by a basin of cold water. They looked at each other, but no one said a word. Firstly, according to Hu Yunfeng, Kang Mingming indeed had the qualifications to be the new deacon. The others did not have the confidence to compete with him. Secondly, the newcomer assessment was ranked separately by the 3 pavilions, which meant that even if Kang Mingming became the new deacon, the greatest impact would be on the Soaring Sky Pavilion's own rookies. It had little to do with the Mysterious Pavilion and Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies. And the Soaring Sky Pavilion rookies had always been obedient to Su Lingchong. Letting Kang Mingming be the new deacon was entirely Su Lingchong's idea, so they naturally would not object. As for the other 2 pavilions, it was none of their business, so there was no need for them to seek their own misfortune. Since none of you are saying anything, it seems like there are no objections. Then it's decided. From today onwards, Kang Mingming will be your new deacon. Hu Yunfeng immediately announced. Thank you, thank you. Kang Mingming smiled and cupped his hands at the rookies. He was so proud of himself that it made the rookies envious. However, it was useless to be envious. He had the support of young Master Su Lingchong. Actually, there were some who were not convinced, but they did not dare to say it out loud. Hu Yunfeng directly said those who had objections to raise their hands. Wasn't that the same as shooting the bird that poked its head out? Xiao Hongkai wanted to speak, but she was held back by Lin Yi, who smiled faintly and shook his head. This so-called newcomer deacon might be a very impressive and lucrative position in the eyes of others, but in Lin Yi's eyes, it was nothing. It was a waste of time for him to be the deacon. If he had the time, he might as well go to the spirit jade mine and dig out some waste jade. After selecting the newcomer deacon, the next step was to familiarize himself with the rules. After that, the newcomer assessment would officially begin. The 6 segments would be completed within the next 5 months. After looking carefully at the content of the first segment, Lin Yi could not help but laugh. It was yet another familiar test, resisting coercion. Don't forget, when he participated in the Hidden Family Summit in the secular world, he had experienced such a test. Now that he had to face a similar situation, it was as if he was very familiar with it. Chapter 3705. The test venue for this round was not in the Welcome Pavilion. The group of rookies were led by Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng and their respective managing senior brothers, and after an hour of walking, they arrived at their destination. Although the destination was the same grand and majestic building as the Welcome Pavilion and Spirit Jade Hall, before the rookies even reached it, they felt an unprecedented killing intent and pressure surging towards them. Some of the weaker rookies even staggered, and almost made a fool of themselves in public. This display of strength was exactly the same as the time when they went to the back mountain hall, except that back then, they were frightened by the power of the 3 elder-level experts. But this time, there was no one in front of them, only an empty and magnificent building. Compared to the heavily guarded Spirit Jade Hall and Back Mountain Hall, there was not even a shadow of a guard here. Only the huge signboard above their heads proclaimed the supreme majesty of this place. Law Enforcement Hall. In the imagination of the rookies, a place like the Law Enforcement Hall was definitely a place where experts were as numerous as the clouds. The heavy security should only be more than that of Spirit Jade Hall and Back Mountain Hall. However, the scene in front of them was completely different from what they imagined. There was not a single guard, and other than a few experts with restrained aura hurriedly shuttling through the corridors of the building, there was almost no one else. But even so, this place still made the rookies tremble for no reason. It was as if after coming here, all their disguises and psychological defenses were instantly stripped away, and all their secrets were exposed. The legendary Law Enforcement Hall was indeed an unfathomable place. Lin Yi could not help but praise in his heart. Even if they were thrown here without doing anything, it was already a form of pressure resistance test. And compared to the suppression of true qi in the secular world, this pressure was clearly more brilliant and powerful. It had already exceeded the level of the flesh, and even the mind would be unable to withstand it. It was not something that could be offset by the body's true qi. Lin Yi believed that most of the people present would not be able to withstand it for long before having a mental breakdown. Law Enforcement Hall, including the layout of all the surrounding buildings. At the beginning of its construction, it was naturally an extremely powerful pressure array. Do you see that circular high platform in the middle of the square? Hu Yunfeng pointed to a place not far away and said, that is the place used to execute criminals. It is also the place where the formation is the most powerful. As for you, you will take the first test on that high platform. Everyone looked over. The high platform that Hu Yunfeng was pointing at looked ordinary, except for its location in the middle of the plaza. There was nothing strange about it. However, when everyone carefully stared at it, their hearts inexplicably palpitated in unison, as if they would be swallowed by it in the next moment. This place is very dangerous. Was it really okay to let so many newcomers who hadn't even reached the Foundation establishment realm to take the test? A guy with a slightly weaker will would probably have a nervous breakdown very quickly. He might even go crazy on the spot. While Lin Yi was puzzled, he heard Hu Yunfeng say, later, I will specially invite a few Law Enforcement Hall experts to control the array on the high platform. But don't misunderstand, I didn't invite them to increase the difficulty of the test. On the contrary, their task is to help you reduce the pressure on the array. Otherwise, all of you here will definitely not be able to last more than the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn. Hu Yunfeng's words were not alarmist talk. If the power of the law enforcement hall's pressure array was really activated, not to mention a bunch of experts at the peak of heaven's stage, even an expert at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm late stage would be suppressed to the point of bleeding from the 7 orifices in a moment. There was no possibility of survival. And now this state. Although the pressure array had not been fully activated, the pressure on the circular high platform was definitely not something that the newcomers present could bear. Someone must control the array to reduce the pressure for them. After a while, the newcomers came down to the side of the circular high platform under Hu Yunfeng's lead. Even if they hadn't stood on the high platform, everyone already felt that it was a lot more strenuous. This kind of place was really not for ordinary people to stay. No wonder people often said that anyone who came to the law enforcement hall would no longer have any secrets. Although this was somewhat exaggerated. But it was still worthy of the name. Just think about it, no matter how strong an expert was, they would definitely be mentally exhausted under such pressure. Moreover, there was no lack of experts in the law enforcement hall that were proficient in mental martial techniques. If they revealed even the slightest flaw, they would immediately be taken advantage of. Thus, the so-called secrets would naturally not be mentioned. But what made Lin Yi feel more fortunate was that he was here today to accept the newcomer's test and not appear as a criminal. Otherwise, there was a possibility that the secrets on him would really be exposed. At this moment, the few law enforcement hall experts that Hu Yunfeng mentioned were already in place. What made Lin Yi more surprised was that he actually saw 2 familiar faces beside this group of people. One was Su Lingchong. This guy was not a member of the law enforcement hall at all. 2 days ago at the back mountain hall, he had already made things difficult for him. Now that he had appeared here like a ghost, he must be up to some bad tricks again. And the other person was Laner, who he had just met in the woods yesterday. Of course, there was also her inseparable little curly bear. After discovering Lin Yi in the crowd, the little curly bear immediately whimpered and wanted to pounce on Lin Yi. However, it was held back by Shanghai Laner. Today was different from the past. They were going to enter the assessment soon. She could not let the little curly bear affect Lin Yi's state. Moreover, she had just promised Lin Yi yesterday that she would cooperate with him to put on an act. At this moment, there were so many people watching. Naturally, she had to pretend to hate Lin Yi. It was even more impossible for her to let the little curly bear get close to Lin Yi. However, although Shanghai Laner appeared to be very disgusted when she glanced at Lin Yi, there was a clear hint of warning and worry in her eyes. The reason why she came today was actually because she was invited by Su Lingchong. After the previous act, Su Lingchong was convinced that she had completely fallen out with Lin Yi. Therefore, he specially invited her to the law enforcement hall to observe the newcomer's test. He said that he wanted to take the opportunity to deal with Lin Yi in order to win the beauty's favor. And with young Master Su's influence, even if he was not a member of the law enforcement hall, it would be easy to deal with Lin Yi. It just so happened that among the law enforcement hall experts that Hu Yunfeng invited, there were people he was familiar with. He just needed to greet them and let them take the opportunity to deal with Lin Yi. It was just a matter of a sentence. Chapter 3706. After all, with her presence, if Lin Yi was really in danger, she could come forward to stop it. At most, people would see through her relationship with Lin Yi, but at least she could guarantee Lin Yi's safety. Su Lingchong naturally didn't notice Shanghai Laner's little thoughts. He thought that this miss would like the program he arranged. Little did he know, she was the little senior sister who claimed to protect Lin Yi. Looking at Lin Yi in the crowd, Su Lingchong smiled coldly. This was the first time he arranged a pressure resistance test for a newcomer. It wouldn't be too surprising if some accident happened in the process and an unlucky newcomer died. As Su Lingchong didn't discuss it with Meng Jueguang and the others, it was completely his own idea. Therefore, whether it was Zhong Pingliang or Li Jingming, they couldn't provide any information to Lin Yi beforehand. However, the warning look in Shanghai Laner's eyes was enough to explain the problem. Lin Yi had long sensed the fatal danger. After all, during the hidden Noble House Summit in the secular world, there were people who wanted to kill him. This time, it was just that it was Su Lingchong, it was nothing new. However, although he had already sensed that the other party was up to no good, Lin Yi didn't have the slightest intention of retreating, because he was confident that he could escape unscathed. After reiterating the rules, Hu Yunfeng let all the newcomers enter the high platform and accept the pressure test together. At that time, the points of the newcomers from the 3 great pavilions would be evaluated separately, and it wouldn't affect each other. The points of the pressure resistance test would be obtained by adding up 2 parts. One was the time limit points, and the other was the ranking points. The so-called time limit points were based on how long you could last. If it was more than 1 incense stick's time, you would get 5 points. 2 incense sticks time was 10 points, and 3 incense sticks time was 15 points. And so on until 30 points were capped. The so-called ranking points were based on your ranking among the newcomers from the 3 great pavilions. If you lasted the longest and ranked first, you would get 15 points, second would get 14 points, and so on. The 15th place at the bottom only had 1 point. In theory, in this pressure resistance assessment round, the person with the highest score would be able to obtain 30 time limit points and 15 ranking points at the same time, adding up to 45 points. Of course, it was basically impossible to get full marks in this theory. A normal person could only last for the time it took for 3 incense sticks to burn. As for those who wanted to last for more than 6 incense sticks worth of time limit points, it was impossible. Pretentious newbie, I hope you can survive this round. I'm still waiting for a chance to wash away my shame. Ha ha ha. On the way into the arena, Meng Tong deliberately leaned over and showed off his biceps, fully displaying the aura of an early-stage foundation establishment expert. This idiot actually broke through the early stage of the foundation establishment realm? Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai glanced at each other in shock. Although each of them had a foundation building pill in their hands, although both of them had a foundation establishment pill in their hands, they weren't like Meng Tong who could get the foundation establishment elixir from Su Lingchong, so they didn't dare to take it until now. However, Lin Yi wasn't surprised at all. After all, he had already received information beforehand that this guy had taken both the foundation establishment pill and the foundation establishment elixir. If he still couldn't succeed in the foundation establishment realm, then he was really trash. Not only had Meng Tong succeeded in the foundation establishment realm, but he had also specially observed Kang Mingming and Zhong Pingliang. Both of them were now experts in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. Putting everything else aside, just from the perspective of cultivation resources, it was really a wise move for them to cling tightly to Su Lingchong's thick thigh. And including Lin Yi himself, in just a month's time, there were already 4 people who had succeeded in the foundation establishment realm. This was simply unimaginable in previous years. Of course, this was mainly due to the foundation establishment pill. This guy was just lucky. It's not a big deal even if he succeeded. You guys don't have to take it to heart. The most important thing now is to deal with this pressure test and strive for a good start. However, safety first. Later, you still have to act according to your capabilities. Don't be blindly impulsive, Lin Yi warned the 2 sternly. He was experienced and knew that in this kind of pressure test, one's mind absolutely couldn't be mixed with too many distracting thoughts. Otherwise, it would be very easy for problems to occur. Especially when they were facing the law enforcement hall's pressure formation this time. In addition to the common true chi pressure, there was also a faint mental pressure. Under the double attack of the physical and mental body, the slightest carelessness would cause one to collapse. There was no room for carelessness, and they couldn't blindly try to be brave. Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai both nodded. They weren't people who didn't know when to advance or retreat. Although points were important, they first had to be alive to fight for it. The newcomer assessment had a total of 6 stages. This was only the first one. There was still a long way to go. Upon entering the circular platform, Zhang Xian immediately felt his body sink. Not only was his body being crushed by the powerful zhenqi, even his spirit felt as if it was being shackled by a heavy shackle. All of his nerves were stretched taut, giving off the feeling that they could snap at any moment. And at the same time that their minds were being suppressed, the true qi in their bodies also began to gradually stagnate. This in turn caused the physical pressure and destruction to become even more severe, further increasing the burden on their minds. The two affected each other, forming an extremely terrifying vicious cycle. Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh. This pressure test was indeed far more difficult than the Hidden House Summit in the secular world. After all the newcomers from the three great pavilions had entered and sat down, Hu Yunfeng exchanged glances with a few other law enforcement hall experts who were also seated. They then signaled for the first incense to be lit. The first pressure test had officially begun. No matter what level of strength one was at, the pressure test had always been an excellent way to test one's talent and potential. This was especially true for a formation like the one before them that could simultaneously exert pressure on both the physical and mental body. Everyone's talent and potential could be seen at a glance, and it was very easy to distinguish who was better and who was worse. After all, if it was purely physical pressure, it would completely depend on the strength of the true qi in each person's body. This would only be able to test one's current strength, but not their future potential. In other words, even if one relied purely on the accumulation of medicinal pills and had no so-called potential to develop, as long as one's strength was enough, it would be enough to obtain high points in this kind of pure physical pressure test. However, once spiritual pressure was added at the same time, the effect would be completely different. Relying on true qi might be able to resist for a while, but if one's will wasn't strong enough, under the pressure of the vicious cycle, no matter how strong the true qi in one's body was, it would not be able to last long. Chapter 3707. For cultivators, strength could only represent a moment, but willpower was the key to reaching the limit of strength in the future. Only those who were equally strong in strength and willpower could obtain enough points in such a test. Otherwise, no matter which aspect of strength or willpower was lacking, it would be impossible to obtain high points in this test. This was the only way to reflect the significance of the newcomer assessment and the value of every point. One had to know that every point in the newcomer assessment would be recorded into the archives of the three great pavilions, affecting the recognition of each newcomer by the three great pavilions. The number of points not only determined whether one would have an advantage in the newcomer assessment, but it also affected the treatment one would receive after entering the three great pavilions. After all, even the three great pavilions had limited resources for training. When the time came, would these resources be allocated to the weaklings with low points and weak in all aspects, or to the geniuses with high points and strong in all aspects? The answer was obvious. Lin Yi wasn't the only one who knew this. All the other newcomers present knew this as well, so none of them dared to slack off. They had to give it their all. Otherwise, not only would he lose at the starting line, but he would also lose his entire cultivation career. After the test officially began, all the newcomers from the three great pavilions channeled their own arts to resist the pressure, giving it their all as if they were facing a great enemy. They were afraid that the slightest bit of carelessness would cause them to slip up. However, there were a few people who were clearly more relaxed than the others. Kang Mingming, Zhong Pingliang, Meng Tong, and Lin Yi were all masters at the early stage of foundation establishment. Their strength was much higher than the other newcomers who hadn't succeeded yet, so it was naturally easier for them to deal with the pressure. After all, disregarding the strength of their willpower, the four of them were strong, so they naturally had more capital than the others. If everyone's willpower was on the same level, then they would undoubtedly have the last laugh. Among the four of them, Lin Yi was the most at ease. This wasn't just because he was a master at the early stage of foundation establishment, which was a level higher than the other three. More importantly, he had the space in the jade pendant behind him, and could quickly replenish the qi in his body at any time. In other words, if it was like the Hidden House Summit in the mortal world, and it was just purely physical pressure, it didn't matter how long he wanted to sit here, because the qi in his body wouldn't run out. However, this time, there was an additional layer of superior spiritual pressure. This was a brand new test for Lin Yi. But even so, he was still far more relaxed than the others. The same principle applied to him. His capital was far more abundant than everyone else's combined. There was no need to worry about his real qi being exhausted. As long as he focused on dealing with the mental pressure, this was the biggest advantage that Lin Yi had over the others present. In terms of willpower. Don't forget that this guy was a strong person who had slaughtered his way up from the mortal world. He was calm and collected even after being criticized several times. Moreover, he had always been stronger than the strong and never retreated. How could he lose to others with this kind of willpower? Bullshit. However, while Lin Yi could remain calm, the others present did not have the ability to do so. They did not have a strong will like him. After persisting for a few moments, fine beads of sweat began to appear on the rookies' foreheads as they slid down bit by bit. This was a sign that they were beginning to find it strenuous. It should be known that cultivators who had reached the level of Heaven Stage Great Circle, under normal circumstances, no matter how intense the exercise was or how high the surrounding temperature was, as long as the true qi in their body had not been exhausted. It was absolutely impossible to have this kind of ordinary fatigue. And once this kind of fatigue appeared, it meant that their current state was not far from that of a weak ordinary person. Sure enough, after just half an incense stick of time, the first person to withdraw appeared. It was a rookie from the Blue Cloud Pavilion. Although only half an incense stick of time had passed, when he walked out of the high platform, his legs were already trembling. However, his legs were already trembling, and his entire body was already soaked in his own sweat. This person looked back unwillingly. In the end, he could only hang his head dejectedly and move with heavy footsteps to the rest area at the side. He did not persist for the incense stick of time. This meant that his assessment points were 0. Being the first to withdraw meant that his ranking points were only 1 point. Adding up the 2 points, his assessment points for the first segment was a pitiful 1 point. This was already the lowest number of points that could be obtained in theory. Even if others wanted to score lower than him, it was impossible. However, no matter how unwilling he was, the result of 1 point was already a foregone conclusion. Meng Zhuoguang and senior brother Ku Bai, the 2 senior stewards of the Blue Cloud Pavilion, had already recorded his name. After this, it would be handed over to the new deacon, Kang Ming, to announce it. There was no possibility of any changes. If he was given another chance, even if he knew that he would become a shameful laughing stock, he could only grit his teeth and make the same choice. After all, if he overestimated his ability and continued to force his way in, not only would he not be able to obtain more points, he might even lose his life here. This was not a joke. After the first precedent, there was soon a second and a third. When the pavilion master, Hu Yunfeng, ordered someone to light the second incense stick, the field was already 1/3 empty. In other words, 1/3 of the rookies from the 3 pavilions could not persist for the incense stick of time and had no choice but to withdraw. This was in line with the words on the notice. There were 6 segments in the rookie assessment, and every point was not easy to obtain. Up until this moment, Lin Yi was still at ease and did not feel any obvious pressure. Although there were signs of fatigue due to the mental pressure, it did not affect the circulation of vital energy in his body. This, in turn, reduced the pressure on Lin Yi, so that there would not be a vicious cycle of mental and physical drag on each other. All the rookies, including Lin Yi, knew that once a vicious cycle occurred, it meant that they were not far from being eliminated. When the second incense stick of time was lit, many of the rookies in the field heaved a sigh of relief. Not long after, they began to withdraw one after another. The torture of this double pressure was not something that a normal person could endure. To be able to persist for the full incense stick of time and obtain 5 points was already a satisfactory result for them. Since they knew that there was no hope of persisting until the second incense stick of time burned out, instead of fighting for those few points, they might as well withdraw. This way, they would not have to risk their lives. Chapter 3708. However, what surprised everyone was that among these 10 people, there were actually 4 newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion, which was more than half of the total number of newcomers from Soaring Sky Pavilion and Mysterious Pavilion. These 4 people were Meng Tong, Xiao Ran, Xiao Hongkai, and Lin Yi. Apart from them, there were 3 people from Soaring Sky Pavilion and Mysterious Pavilion. Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng's face darkened. Although the assessment points of the 3 pavilions were calculated separately, the comparison was clear at a glance. If someone with ulterior motives spread the news, the higher-ups might think that he was incompetent as the Pavilion Master of Welcoming Pavilion. After all, he had the backing of Soaring Sky Pavilion. If he couldn't even take care of the newcomers from Soaring Sky Pavilion, and instead let the weak newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion climb above him, how could he bear it? But fortunately, not long after the 3rd incense stick was lit, 2 newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion withdrew first, which made Hu Yunfeng's expression soften a little. But fortunately, not long after the 3rd incense stick was lit, 2 newcomers from Blue Cloud Pavilion withdrew first, which made Hu Yunfeng's expression soften a little. At this moment, the 2 people who withdrew were Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai. Whether it was strength or willpower, the 2 of them were considered outstanding among the experts at Heaven's Stage Full Circle. But in the end, they were only more powerful at Heaven's Stage Full Circle, and still couldn't be compared to the experts at the early stage of Foundation Establishment stage. For the 2 of them, to be able to persist for more than 2 incense sticks was already quite commendable, and this result was already a level higher than the others. And right at this moment, Su Lingchong, who was below the stage, suddenly gave a meaningful glance to the few law enforcement hall experts on the stage, and they nodded without a trace. After that, in an instant, the dual pressure that poured down on Lin Yi's head abruptly increased, and was more than twice as strong as before. Lin Yi, who was trapped in it, suddenly had a thought. After waiting for so long, these people were finally going to make a move on him. One must know that in this pressure assessment, there was no such thing as increasing the pressure midway. In theory, the intensity should be the same from beginning to end. The reason why they didn't directly target Lin Yi was because Su Lingchong and these law enforcement hall experts had all the misgivings. The reason was very simple. Although they could easily adjust the intensity of the pressure around Lin Yi was, after all, an expert in the early stage of Foundation Establishment on the surface. If he was killed on the stage in the 1st incense stick, it would be too strange. Now that the 3rd incense stick had burned, the time was truly ripe. Because he had persisted for the first 2 incense sticks of time. At this time, even an expert in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm was starting to be unable to hold on. Even if Lin Yi died on the stage, it wouldn't be too surprising. After others heard about it, they would at most sneer and say that the secular world was full of fake experts, but they would not suspect them. After the time it took for 2 incense sticks to burn, the pressure suddenly doubled, which was like running a marathon for 20 kilometers. Suddenly, a sandbag equal to your weight was pressed on your body. This difficulty was not as simple as doubling the numbers, but 10 times, or even 20 times. If it weren't for Lin Yi, but Kang Ming and the other experts in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, they would have been caught off guard and spit out a mouthful of old blood. It was not impossible for them to be seriously injured or even die on the spot. What a pity. Their target was Lin Yi, not only an expert in the peak of the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm who had hidden his strength, but also a strong man with an extremely strong will who sat in the space of the jade pendant. Twice the pressure was enough to crush any newcomer on the scene, but they couldn't do anything to Lin Yi. Twice the pressure had already begun to make Lin Yi feel a little strenuous, but that was all. With his current mental state, plus the true qi in the space of the jade pendant, at this level, it was still not a big problem for him to persist for the time it took for 2 incense sticks of time. Lin Yi's calm performance from beginning to end made the few experts of the law enforcement hall dumbfounded. Below the field, Su Lingchong was still signaling them with his eyes, hinting them to quickly make a move on Lin Yi. Little did they know that they had already made a move, it was just that they didn't show it on Lin Yi. This kid really had some ability. A mere newcomer from the secular world was actually able to withstand such a strong pressure with a normal expression. No wonder even a young master like Su Lingchong had to specially target him. The few experts of the law enforcement hall were secretly shocked, but this was something that Su Lingchong had ordered them to do. It was absolutely impossible for them to stop just like that. After a tacit exchange of glances, they immediately joined hands to increase the pressure around Lin Yi's body again, directly to the intensity of 3 times the pressure. For a moment, the pressure on Lin Yi's body became heavier, and his spirit finally began to feel a little tired. The true qi circulation of the art of dragon mastery in his body also became a little blocked, but the problem wasn't too big. At least it hadn't reached the point of a vicious cycle, and he could still continue to persevere. However, there was no problem on Lin Yi's side, but Meng Tong, who was not far from him, was the first to suffer. One must know that, including all the surrounding buildings, the pressure formation of the law enforcement hall was a natural whole. Even if these few experts of the law enforcement hall could join hands to adjust the intensity of the pressure in a part of the area, it was impossible to completely accurately adjust it to a single person, and the people around him would inevitably be affected. In other words, at the same time that they released 3 times the pressure on top of Lin Yi's head, Meng Tong, who was not far from Lin Yi, was similarly affected. It was just that at this moment, although the pressure that descended on top of his head was not 3 times as exaggerated, it was still 2 times. 2 times the pressure on Lin Yi was not a big deal, but on Meng Tong, it was fatal. Don't forget, although he was an expert in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, he had only broken through yesterday with the help of the Foundation Establishment Elixir and the Foundation Establishment Elixir. He was an out-and-out newbie in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Compared to the other experts in the Heaven stage, he was naturally full of confidence, but in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm of the same level, he was just a weak newbie. Pfft! Meng Tong was already a little strained, and at this time, the pressure on his body suddenly doubled. Caught off guard, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. This scene immediately caused a burst of exclamation from the other newbies. This was the first newbie to be forced to spit out blood today, and it was one of the 4 early stage experts, Meng Tong. It was really a little surprising. After spitting out blood, Meng Tong did not dare to stay on the stage any longer. He hurriedly staggered down, afraid that he would lose his little life on the stage. Fuck. You guys are fucking messing with me on purpose. After getting off the stage, Meng Tong's first reaction was to curse at the few experts of the law enforcement hall on the stage, causing an uproar among the other newbies. Chapter 3709. In the end, he didn't expect that because of such an inexplicable turn of events, there was still no abnormality on Lin Yi's side. Instead, he, Meng Tong, had become the unluckiest person. It would be strange if he wasn't depressed after encountering such a thing. However, just as he cursed, Meng Tong's little bit of dissatisfaction was immediately forced back by Su Lingchong's stern gaze. Although he didn't know about Su Lingchong's arrangements beforehand, if he didn't react to it after experiencing it himself, then he was really stupid. Seeing that Meng Tong finally realized the crux of the problem, Su Lingchong heaved a sigh of relief. Instructing the law enforcement hall's experts to secretly target Lin Yi was something that absolutely couldn't be exposed. If Meng Tong revealed this little trick in front of everyone's eyes, then it would really be big trouble. Fortunately, although this fellow was stupid, he wasn't stupid to the point where he would reveal everything. When the others heard his cursing just now, they would at most feel that it was inexplicable, but they wouldn't be able to guess the reason behind it. However, senior brother Ku Bai, Xiao Ran, and Xiao Hongkai heard the hidden meaning in his words. Meng Tong's words just now definitely had a lot of meaning. Although they weren't sure what exactly happened to Meng Tong just now, when they looked at the stage again, their gazes were obviously filled with worry. One must know that these law enforcement hall elders were all acquaintances of Su Lingchong. Even if they deliberately targeted Lin Yi, the biggest target would definitely be Lin Yi, and not Meng Tong. Meng Tong might be the fish in the moat that got injured because he was caught in the crossfire. Now that Meng Tong, who was an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment stage, had already been pushed aside, in their understanding, Lin Yi, who was also in the early stage of the foundation establishment stage, would definitely be under more pressure, and his situation would definitely be more difficult. Although it was said that in any segment, if one could fight for a little bit of points, one's personal safety was more important in comparison. One mustn't risk one's life forcefully for a little bit of points, it wasn't worth it. However, they were Lin Yi's accomplices. At this time, even if they guessed that Lin Yi was in a difficult situation, they couldn't help him at all. They couldn't even warn him, because that would disturb Lin Yi's concentration, which could easily cause a big problem. The only thing they could do was to silently pray for Lin Yi to be fine. Otherwise, they might have to prepare to collect Lin Yi's corpse. At this moment, while the bitter senior brother and the others were worried about Lin Yi, the law enforcement hall experts on the stage looked at each other awkwardly. Not only did they not hurt Lin Yi, but they also made Meng Tong die unjustly. This was a little embarrassing. Fortunately, when the fourth incense was lit, only Lin Yi, Kang Ming, and Zhong Pingliang were left. Fortunately, they were far away from Lin Yi, so they wouldn't end up like Meng Tong. 4 times the pressure. The pressure on Lin Yi's body suddenly increased by a layer. His spirit was more tired, and the circulation of the true qi in his body became more stagnant and blocked, making it impossible to completely block the external true qi's strong pressure on his body like before. In this way, it also increased the burden on his spirit, and the vicious cycle effect that was often seen in others finally appeared. At this time, even with the space of the jade pendant that could quickly replenish true qi, Lin Yi obviously began to feel tired. This kid finally couldn't hold on anymore. Several law enforcement hall elders stared at Lin Yi's performance, and at this time, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. Even so, the performance of Lin Yi, a newcomer in the secular world, was enough to impress them. Looking at the whole 3 pavilions, there were only a few people who could resist 4 times the pressure at the early stage of foundation establishment, not to mention that Lin Yi had held on in the field for a full 3 incense sticks of time. After holding on for a while, seeing that the 4th incense stick was about to burn out, Lin Yi knew that his condition was not suitable to continue, so he planned to withdraw from the field after getting the points of the time limit of 4 incense sticks of time. As long as he chose to withdraw in time. Even these law enforcement hall experts couldn't do anything to him, and the points of the time limit of 4 incense sticks of time and the points of the first place in Blue Cloud Pavilion were already quite considerable, so there was no need to take the risk and ask for more. However, at the last moment when the 4th incense stick was about to burn out, when he thought that he had achieved his goal and relaxed the most, the jade pendant's warning suddenly sounded in his mind. The pressure on Lin Yi's body suddenly increased a lot, from 4 times the pressure, to 6 times in an instant, and still increasing. Such a sudden change, even with the advance warning from the jade pendant, Lin Yi was caught unprepared. He felt a sweetness in his throat and almost spat out blood, but in the end he managed to hold it back, and a chill rose in his heart. These people, it's not as simple as just targeting me, they simply want to take this opportunity to kill me. Seeing that Lin Yi was obviously on the verge of collapse, the law enforcement hall experts all sneered. Young Master Su had specifically instructed them to treat this Lin Yi well, even if they didn't kill him directly, they should at least seriously injure him. How could they let him walk out unscathed? It was too late to retreat at this time. It seemed that this time he really had to pay the price of a little injury. Lin Yi thought in his heart, even if the opponent did this to him, he still had enough confidence to hold on until he left the field. It was just a little injury, and for someone like him who could easily heal himself, this was not a painful price to pay. And just as Lin Yi forced himself to stand up, the ghost's voice suddenly sounded in his mind, "Kid, do you need this old man's help?" Lin Yi was stunned, and after listening to the ghost's words, the corner of his mouth slightly curled up, and then he calmly sat back down on the ground. What the hell is this guy doing? The audience suddenly burst into an uproar. Those with discerning eyes could see that Lin Yi was already at his limit. It was already amazing that he could force himself to leave the field, but he actually dared to sit back down at this time. Could it be that he really didn't want his life for such a laughable amount of points? This Lin Yi does have some strength, but unfortunately he doesn't have a brain. Life and points, he can't even distinguish which is more important. It seems that even if he can walk out alive, he will not have a future in the future. The other newcomers should take this as a warning. Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng saw the situation and lightly commented. Chapter 37:10. Su Lingchong sneered and said, "It seems that you guys can quickly find a piece of shroud and prepare it. If he directly went down just now, I guess he would only be seriously injured, at least his life would not be in danger. But now that he is greedy for points and sat back down, it will be impossible for him to think about it again. You guys just wait to collect his corpse." Originally, this young Master Su felt that it was a pity. After all, from Lin Yi's performance just now, he could at most seriously injure him, but there was no way to kill him. But now, this fellow, Lin Yi, actually sat back down in the middle of the battle. He was simply seeking his own death. A sin committed by heaven could be forgiven, but a sin committed by oneself could not be avoided. Since this idiot, Lin Yi, wanted to court death, then he could not blame others. After saying that, Su Lingchong turned his head to look at Shanghai Laner and said ingratiatingly, "Previously, this idiot, Lin Yi, actually dared to provoke our junior sister Lan. He was simply courting death. And now, he overestimated his own strength and wanted to put up a strong front. He really asked for it, and no one could stop him. It just so happens that junior sister can vent your anger." At this moment, Shanghai Laner was conflicted in her heart whether she should stand up to save Lin Yi. Hearing this, she glanced at him and said, "This is all you're doing?" "Hee, sort of, but I didn't ask him to sit back down. As the old saying goes, if you don't court death, you won't die. If he didn't cooperate, I really couldn't do anything to him." Su Lingchong whispered proudly. Shanghai Laner frowned. Although she was worried about Lin Yi's safety, when she thought that this was Lin Yi's own choice, she chose to wait and see for a while. Even though she did not have much contact with Lin Yi, but her intuition told her that Lin Yi was definitely not such an idiot who overestimated his own strength. She had already made up her mind that even if Lin Yi really made a mistake this time, she would wait until she was sure that he was in danger before coming forward to stop him. At this time, senior brother Ku Bai and the others almost have the same mentality as her. Compared with Shanghai Laner, they know Lin Yi better. He knew that Lin Yi wouldn't have acted so rashly if he didn't have the confidence. He must have his reasons for doing so. However, even if they believed in Lin Yi, they still couldn't help but worry. After all, this wasn't a joke. At the same time, Meng Tong and the other Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies mocked him. He was full of sarcasm. When they recalled the last time they were in the back mountain, Lin Yi relied on his fake early-stage foundation building aura to scare and extort them. They couldn't help but gnash their teeth in hatred. Now that they saw Lin Yi bring misfortune upon himself, it was simply too satisfying. Only Li Jingming, who was standing among them, seemed to be sneering as well. But he wasn't sneering at Lin Yi, but at the group of ridiculous idiots around him. Looking at the whole audience, including senior brother Ku Bai and the others, he was the only one who knew Lin Yi's real strength. As a freak who could break through to the peak of the early-stage foundation building within a month after entering the Welcome Pavilion, how could the mediocre people like them understand what Lin Yi did? Li Jingming felt now. It was like watching a group of sparrows ridiculing a swan for overestimating himself. Little did they know that Su Ke really had the ability to soar up to 90,000 miles. When you snorted at others, the real idiot was actually yourself in the mirror. Compared with the people below the stage who didn't know the inside story, the experts of the law enforcement hall on the stage were ridiculing Lin Yi's performance at the moment, but they were also confused. It was really hard to understand. One had to know that the pressure on Lin Yi's head had increased by more than 8 times. Not to mention that he was a newbie in the early-stage foundation building realm, even the experts of the law enforcement hall might not be able to withstand it. Since Lin Yi was able to get to where he was today, he couldn't be an idiot. Even if he was looking for death, even if he was courting death, there was no need for him to choose such a stupid way to die on such an occasion, right? However, the following development really made everyone's jaws drop. After Lin Yi sat back down, his expression actually became extremely relaxed. Not only did he not show any signs of being crushed, but his complexion also began to improve bit by bit. What the hell was going on? For a moment, everyone below the stage didn't know what to say. The group of people, led by Su Lingchong, who spared no effort to call Lin Yi an idiot, were like ducks that were suddenly grabbed by the neck. They didn't even know what to say. Looking at the scene where everyone was speechless, Li Jingming's stomach was about to hurt from laughing too much. As expected of boss Lin Yi, this slap in the face was really fucking crisp. At this time, even an ordinary person could see that Lin Yi didn't show any signs of not being able to do it. Not only was he not unable to do it, but he was also too good. Sitting on the stage was simply like taking a vacation, there was no pressure at all. Shanghai Laner, Ku Bai Shixiang and the others who were on Lin Yi's side immediately let out a sigh of relief. This fellow Lin Yi really made them enjoy a roller coaster ride with him. After a while, the fifth incense stick was lit. Even Kang Mingming and Zhong Pingliang, who weren't affected, finally couldn't hold on anymore and left the stage one after another. Now, only Lin Yi was left on the stage. Su Lingchong, Hu Yunfeng and the others looked at each other, their faces were starting to turn black. What the fuck was going on? Didn't they say that they would deal with Lin Yi and kill Lin Yi? Why did they suddenly become like this? Su Lingchong even started to doubt whether these guys on the stage were actually helping him or not. Otherwise, Lin Yi was obviously at his limit just now. If they really wanted to deal with him, they could just casually add a little pressure and it would be impossible for him to stay until now so easily. Feeling the pressure from Su Lingchong below the stage, the few Hall of Law Enforcement masters looked at each other, clenched their teeth and increased the pressure by a large margin. 12 times the pressure. This was already the limit of what they could control. If they released the restriction again, the power wouldn't be something they could control. At that time, it was very likely that even they themselves would suffer a serious backlash. Anyway, there was no one else on the stage at this moment. There was no need to care about other things. It was enough to deal with this evil Lin Yi. They didn't believe that this kid could even withstand 12 times the pressure. In the hundreds of years since the establishment of the Law Enforcement Hall, there had never been a precedent of a mere early-stage foundation establishment master being able to withstand such a strong pressure. Not to mention the early-stage foundation establishment, even a master at the peak of the late-stage foundation establishment couldn't do it. However, after another incense stick's time, Lin Yi still didn't move. His expression was natural and his breath was steady. It was simply no different from when he first entered the stage. Everyone on the stage was completely speechless. Their faces were all red, and they were ashamed into anger. Chapter 37:11. But then again, even if they thought they were fooled by Lin Yi, out of their instinct to respect the strong, they still couldn't help but feel a little bit of awe. After all, it was already a big miracle that Lin Yi was able to hold on until the sixth incense stick. And at this moment, they didn't even know that the pressure on Lin Yi's head was not just one time, but 12 times. Su Lingchong couldn't help but gnash his teeth, secretly cursing the few law enforcement hall bastards on the stage for not putting in enough effort. Otherwise, how could so many people not be able to deal with a mere Lin Yi? However, as the people involved, the law enforcement hall experts all had livid faces at this moment. They were almost driven crazy by Lin Yi. One had to know that it was very strenuous for them to hold on to 12 times the pressure. If this went on, they would be in big trouble before Lin Yi collapsed. With so many law enforcement hall experts joining hands to deal with a mere newcomer in the welcoming pavilion, if not only did they fail to kill or cripple the other party, but they were also injured by the backlash, it would really make people laugh their heads off. 12 times the pressure was already the limit of what they could control. However, according to Lin Yi's calm demeanor, not to mention 1 or 2 more incense sticks, it didn't seem to be a problem for him to continue sitting here for a year and a half. Today was really fucking strange. Now that things had developed to this point, these law enforcement hall experts were now riding a tiger, and it was hard to get off. They could only bite the bullet and continue to hold on. Otherwise, there was no way they could explain to Su Lingchong. Lin Yi could calmly deal with 12 times the pressure. If this kind of words were said, not to mention that no one would believe it, they would even think that it was an insult to their intelligence. In fact, even the people involved felt that it was unbelievable, and they couldn't help but start to doubt in their hearts. Was there something wrong with this pressure formation? Otherwise, there was no way to explain the strange situation before them. Boy, do you want to continue? I have nothing to do anyway, so I'm happy to play with them. The ghost laughed strangely in Lin Yi's mind. Lin Yi laughed in his heart when he heard this. He realized that ever since he came to Heaven's Stage Island, the ghostly thing's condition was obviously much better than when it was in the secular world. But thinking about it, it probably had something to do with the surrounding environment. Now, he was even in the mood to play and bully these little law enforcement hall kids in high spirits. In the face of this ghostly being, who was a top-notch elder of the Spirit Beast clan, these so-called law enforcement hall powerhouses were nothing more than children. To be able to use the pressure formation to indirectly exchange blows with an elder-level expert, they really didn't know whether this should be considered their honor or their sorrow. That's right, the one who was fighting against the 12-fold pressure wasn't Lin Yi himself, but that damn thing. He was once an elder of the Spirit Beast clan. He was one of the top experts in the entire Heavenly Stage Island. Even if this damn thing only had a soul left, it would still be a piece of cake for him to deal with this level of pressure. The so-called 12 times pressure was nothing in his eyes. As for Lin Yi, the person involved, in everyone's eyes, he didn't feel any pressure at all at this moment. It was no different from when he was meditating and cultivating in the cave residence. In the eyes of outsiders, he was naturally calm and at ease. But the others didn't know that Lin Yi had something hidden on him. If a god like him continued to sit like this, even if the people in the audience didn't know the inside story, they'd still be in awe of him, and at the same time, they'd be suspicious of him. If things went wrong, they'd start all sorts of rumors, and that would be trouble. As for the law enforcement hall powerhouses who were also involved, although they were far more shocked than others, Lin Yi wasn't afraid that they would spread any gossip. After all, what they did couldn't be exposed to the public. If it was known by others, they would be the first unlucky ones. Looking at the 6th incense stick that was about to be lit, Lin Yi smiled slightly and responded to the ghost with his divine sense, "Senior, stop when the 7th incense stick is lit." After the time it took for 6 incense sticks to burn, it meant that he could get 30 points within the time limit. In addition to the 15 points of the first place, Lin Yi had already got the theoretical full score of 45 points. Even if he continued to persist, the points wouldn't increase anymore. It was meaningless. Oh. Boy, you know when to stop. The ghostly thing chuckled and said, "Fine, since you've said so, this old man won't meddle. However, after playing with them for so long, I have to leave them some souvenirs." Lin Yi smiled secretly. Although he didn't know what the ghost was going to do, he could already start to mourn for these law enforcement hall powerhouses. Needless to say, the ghost's means must be extraordinary. When the 6th incense stick burned out and the 7th incense stick was lit under everyone's surprised eyes, Lin Yi was still meditating. On the other hand, the law enforcement hall powerhouses who were responsible for controlling the intensity of the coercion were all sweating profusely. It was obvious that they couldn't hold on any longer. The few of them couldn't help but look at each other. A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Why don't we let this brat go for now and stop for the time being? At most, we'll be scolded by young Master Su. It's not like we'll be dragged into this mess for a mere newcomer. However, just as they were about to stop, the intensity of the coercion suddenly began to rise uncontrollably. In an instant, it broke through the limit of 12 times and began to rapidly approach 15 times and 16 times. In less than a breath's time, it reached an unprecedented height of 20 times. Several law enforcement hall powerhouses suddenly turned pale with fright. Then, before they could react, Lin Yi, who they had been scheming to deal with, stood up and walked down the high platform with ease. This guy was finally willing to come down. The crowd was in an uproar. In the first round of the assessment, Lin Yi was the only newcomer from the 3 pavilions who could get the full 45 points. Even if they were all angered by Lin Yi's teasing, his strength was still there. No matter how aggrieved and dissatisfied they were, in the face of such a godlike performance, they could only say one word: respect. Chapter 37:12. As for the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomer who had a direct competitive relationship with Lin Yi, Meng Tong, who ranked second in this segment, only had 24 points, closely followed by Xiao Ran with 23 points, and Xiao Hongkai with 22 points. All of them were pulled away by a large margin by Lin Yi. Junior apprentice brother Lin, you really scared us to death just now. Senior apprentice brother Ku and the others crowded around Lin Yi and complained jokingly. To be honest, they were indeed anxious and scared off stage just now. Not only were they worried for Lin Yi, but they were also worried for themselves at the same time. Don't forget, although senior apprentice brother Ku's status was higher on the surface, Lin Yi was the backbone of their group. If anything happened to Lin Yi, it was simply impossible for them to fight against Meng Jueguang and the others with just the few of them. At that time, it would really be hard to endure. Lin Yi smiled faintly and said, "Heh. I told you guys long ago, I know what I'm doing and won't act recklessly." Senior apprentice brother Ku and the others looked at each other and smiled bitterly. In this kind of situation just now, how could they not be worried? Instead, it was Xiao Hongkai who chuckled and said, "After all, it's our boss Lin Yi. A god-level performance with full marks is nothing difficult at all. This result is completely within my expectations, so I'm not worried at all." Beside him, Xiaoran glanced at him and added a sentence faintly, "Yes, you just trembled when you spoke just now, fuck. I'm just exhausted, alright? I'm not worried that something will happen to boss Lin Yi." Xiao Hongkai cried out strangely. Lin Yi and the others could not help but smile. Other than being nervous in their hearts, who would freaking be exhausted to the point of trembling while speaking? This guy really did not mean what he said. Compared to Lin Yi and the others who were chatting cheerfully, Su Lingchong, Hu Yunfeng, and Meng Jueguang had ugly expressions on their faces. Don't forget that they had just ridiculed Lin Yi for overestimating himself in front of everyone. Now look at what happened. Lin Yi walked down the stage with full marks, and the words he said just now naturally became a sharp slap to their own faces. Their cheeks hurt, but Lin Yi's words were like a slap to their own faces. The pain was unforgettable. It was rare to see someone slap their own face so cleanly and ruthlessly. Just as all the rookies were surrounding Lin Yi, who had scored full marks for the divine level, and were discussing and sighing with relish, the group of law enforcement hall experts, who could have called it a day, suddenly stopped. At this moment, they were stuck in a quagmire, unable to extricate themselves. Their faces were filled with disbelief and fear. What are these idiots doing up there? Did he not dare to come down because he was too ashamed to face him? Chapter 37:13. This person's strength should be comparable to an elder-level expert. Lin Yi thought to himself. However, although this person looked young, his true age should not be young. Otherwise, no matter how talented he was, it was impossible for him to have such powerful strength. The young man's eyes then fell on the few law enforcement hall experts. Seeing their sorry state, he frowned slightly and said, "A bunch of trash." After saying that, he stretched out his hand and waved it in the air, and the super strong pressure that was pressing down on them was instantly swept away, and the pressure formation also quietly returned to its original state, as if it had never been operated at full strength. The few law enforcement hall experts struggled back from the brink of death. Without adjusting their breathing, they hurriedly knelt in front of the young man and respectfully said in unison, "Greetings, Hall Master." The group of newcomers below the stage immediately looked at each other. Those who were slightly more knowledgeable had already guessed the identity of this young man. He was actually the famous current Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall, Ram Jia. It was said that this Ram Jia was a publicly recognized genius of the three pavilions in hundreds of years. He was currently 38 years old, but his strength was comparable to an elder-level expert. He was the youngest Hall Master in the history of the Law Enforcement Hall. At the same time, he was also the most cold-blooded Hall Master in the history of the Law Enforcement Hall. Lin Yi had previously heard senior brother Ku Bai mention this person. It had only been 3 years since he took office, but he had relied on his powerful methods to manage the Law Enforcement Hall, which had many factions, into a monolithic entity. More importantly, in these 3 years, 2 of the elders of the 3 pavilions had been beaten to the ground by him for various crimes. This was something that his predecessor had not been able to do for decades. Knowing someone by reputation was not as good as meeting them in person. This person was indeed not simple. Lin Yi sighed in his heart. Suddenly, he noticed that Li Jingming, who was not far from him, seemed to be a little strange. He seemed a little nervous. Lin Yi was immediately puzzled. A high and mighty figure like Ram Jia should not have any interaction with him, Li Jingming, a small great perfection of heaven's stage newcomer. What was there to be nervous about? But on second thought, with Li Jingming's background, Li Jingming's family background was not something to be proud of. When the Qiushui Manor was annihilated, the Law Enforcement Hall was pressured by the mastermind behind the scenes, which was a certain elder surnamed Li. However, at that time, Gong Yangjia had yet to take over the Law Enforcement Hall. If Ram Jia, the iron-fisted man, had been in charge of the investigation, the result might have been completely different. What Lin Yi did not know was, Li Jingming's current dilemma was not because he regretted that Ram Jia didn't take over the Law Enforcement Hall at that time, but because of an even more frightening reason. However, before he could gain enough strength, he could only bury his hatred deep in his heart, no matter how great it was. He did not dare to show any signs of abnormality. Otherwise, what awaited him would be a disaster. Li Jingming suddenly turned his head and looked at Lin Yi meaningfully. From what he knew, in the future, there would be no one in the 3 great pavilions who could compete with a genius like Ram Jia. However, if it was Lin Yi's boss who had done amazing things time and time again, when he grew up in the future, there might be a slight possibility. Hope. Boss Lin Yi could be like the miracle pill Dr. Zhang Liju in the mortal world, soaring to the sky. What happened? Ram Jia's calm tone did not contain a trace of emotion, but the feeling it gave people was an inexplicable pressure, making people unable to have any thoughts of disobeying him. The few Law Enforcement Hall experts on the ground looked at each other, and one of them answered carefully, reporting to Master, "We are in charge of cooperating with the newcomer assessment of the welcoming pavilion, but the pressure formation suddenly went out of control. The reason is unknown." The reason is unknown? Ram Jia's cold eyes swept across them, making their hairs stand on end. If it wasn't for the fact that they only did something to Lin Yi. If they really didn't know why the pressure formation suddenly went out of control, just this look alone would make them reveal the truth. As the master of the Law Enforcement Hall, if Ram Jia wanted to pry some secrets out of their mouths, it would be a piece of cake. We really don't know. They quickly lowered their heads even more. Ram Jia didn't say anything, but looking at his expression, he didn't have the intention to investigate further. After all, the pressure formation involved the arrangement of all the pavilions in the entire Law Enforcement Hall. While it was powerful, any slight movement in any part of it could affect the operation of the entire formation. It was common for the formation to go out of control. The few Law Enforcement Hall experts who were kneeling on the ground heaved a sigh of relief. Although they didn't lie to Ram Jia in any way, they did hide the matter regarding Lin Yi. If this master were to investigate further, they would be skinned alive, even if they didn't die. Ram Jia coldly glanced at the people in the welcoming pavilion and said, "The Law Enforcement Hall doesn't welcome irrelevant people." Since it's over, quickly chase these irrelevant people away. Hearing this, the newcomers below the stage immediately breathed heavily, and they couldn't help but feel resentful. Although this fellow was powerful, his words were too condescending, weren't they? At that moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Hu Yunfeng. He was the master of the welcoming pavilion, their leader, so naturally, he should be the one to show up. However, Hu Yunfeng turned a deaf ear from the beginning to the end. He didn't even dare to let out a fart. Admittedly, the welcoming pavilion and the law enforcement hall were both independent halls of the three great pavilions. Putting aside their respective strengths, in theory, as the pavilion master of the welcoming pavilion, his position was the same as the hall master of the law enforcement hall. Moreover, the newcomer assessment had been approved by the Elders Guild, so he had the capital to argue with the other party. However, the other party was the famous Ram Jie. He, Hu Yunfeng, was at most a slightly stronger ant in the other party's eyes. To challenge such a fierce god, what kind of joke was that? If he really dared to do so, the law enforcement hall might invite him as a guest tomorrow and dig out all his secrets. When that happened, he would just be waiting to die. After saying this, Gong Yangjie didn't even look at anyone else. In a flash, his figure flashed off the high platform. In the next moment, he had already disappeared from everyone's sight. Everyone unconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. It was as if a huge mountain had suddenly disappeared from their bodies. The pressure that Gong Yangjie brought to them, to a certain extent, was comparable to the pressure test from before. It was even more so. Chapter 37:14. At this moment, Meng Jueguang suddenly said something that diverted everyone's attention. Lord Pavilion Master, since the suppression array has lost control, should we recalculate the scores for this assessment? The moment this was said, there was an uproar once again. The suppression array had lost control, which meant that the assessment from before was inaccurate. In theory, there was a need for a reassessment. And Meng Jueguang's motive for saying this was very obvious. He was taking the opportunity to help Hu Yunfeng out of a predicament, and at the same time, he was targeting Lin Yi. This was because if there was a reassessment, the person who would suffer the most would be him, the person who had obtained full marks. However, Lin Yi responded with a faint smile. He did not have any intention to object. After all, he did not rely on luck to obtain the points he had. Even if there were a few more rounds, he would still obtain full marks. The outcome would not be any different from now. Hu Yunfeng pondered for a moment when he heard this and turned to look at Su Lingchong. What do you think, young Master Su? You are their senior brother, and as a bystander, your opinion will definitely be more pertinent. The rookies could not help but secretly despise him. This Lord Pavilion Master was not only a coward, but he was also good at sucking up. To be able to sit in such a position, he indeed had some ability. Unfortunately, it was not any proper ability. Su Lingchong, on the other hand, looked at the few experts of the Hall of Law on the stage. If they couldn't help him take the opportunity to deal with Lin Yi, it would be meaningless no matter how many times he repeated it. He immediately asked, "What do you think?" The few law enforcement hall experts looked at each other and gave a wry smile. Just one round and he was already in such a miserable state. Another round? Wouldn't that cost him his life? Furthermore, Ram Jie had just said that the law enforcement hall did not welcome miscellaneous people. If they were to help welcome Pavilion reassess, wouldn't that be openly going against Ram Jie's intentions? This was not a joke. The leader could only step forward and say, "Young Master Su." Also, Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng, the array actually lost control for an instant. It was normal before, so there is no need to reassess. Su Lingchong was stunned when he heard this. He glanced at the few people who seemed to be hiding something. He nodded to Hu Yunfeng without saying anything else. Seeing this, Hu Yunfeng said, "Since that's the case, then it's settled. Let's return to the welcoming pavilion first. Also, junior brother Kong, I'll have to trouble you to publish the points of every newcomer on the leaderboard. When the time comes, we can compare them." after giving the order. The rookies, under the guidance of their steward's senior brothers, hurriedly left the law enforcement hall, a place that made them feel extremely repressed. They returned to recuperate and prepare for the second assessment round in 3 days. When Lin Yi left with senior brother Ku Bai and the others, he exchanged a glance with Shanghai Laner and secretly made a grateful gesture. After all, this little senior sister had come here today to support him, so it was only right for her to thank him. However, Shanghai Laner still had to pretend to hate him on the surface, so she could only secretly signal him with hand gestures. Humph. Shangguan Laner deliberately responded with a cold snort, but in her heart, she was secretly happy for Lin Yi, and her mood was very good. Today, not only did Su Lingchong, this extremely annoying fellow, fail to harm Lin Yi. Instead, Lin Yi miraculously obtained a full score, which was simply too satisfying. After the newcomers left the welcoming pavilion, Shanghai Laner also followed them and left. Only Su Lingchong stayed behind in the name of caring for his law enforcement hall friends. His purpose was naturally to inquire about the inside story. What the hell are you guys doing? You've turned a deaf ear to my words, don't tell me that you can't even deal with a mere Lin Yi. Su Lingchong looked at the few law enforcement hall experts in a sorry state, and his anger rose. Today, he had promised Shanghai Laner that he would deal with Lin Yi, but in the end, not only was Lin Yi unscathed, he even obtained a full score in such a grand manner. Moreover, he had gracefully obtained a full score. Where would he, young Master Su, put his face? Shanghai Laner didn't pay much attention to him. Today, she had lost her face, and in the future, she wouldn't give him a good face. Little did she know, that as long as he said that he wanted to deal with Lin Yi, Shanghai Laner would definitely follow him. No matter how much Shangguan Laner hated him, she would definitely follow him when the time came. After all, she was his little senior sister who had to protect him. The few law enforcement hall experts looked at each other helplessly. Although this young Master Su had a deep background and couldn't be provoked, when facing him, they didn't tremble with fear like they did when facing Ram Jia, and they felt somewhat embarrassed. The person in the lead replied in a deep voice, "Young Master Su, we really did our best just now, otherwise, we wouldn't have lost control of the array. Moreover, you saw the situation just now with your own eyes. If it wasn't for Hall Leader Gong Yang helping us in time, we would already be corpses at this time. How could Lin Yi still be unscathed? You all did your best, but you still let him get a full score?" Su Lingchong said with a puzzled face. In fact, he didn't believe that these people would turn a deaf ear to his words. After all, they were old acquaintances who had known each other for a long time. These people could now work in the law enforcement hall, which was revered by everyone, because of their relationship with his grandfather, Su Yuanzheng. There was no reason for them to offend him so perfunctorily for a newcomer they didn't know. This question, not only Su Lingchong was puzzled, even these law enforcement hall experts were puzzled. If the array was said to be out of their control after the 12-fold suppression, then what about before that? Obviously, everything was under their control. If it was said that Lin Yi, a newcomer in the early stage of Foundation establishment, could calmly withstand the 12-fold suppression, that would be too fake. This possibility simply didn't exist. There must have been some problems in the process, but they just didn't notice it at that time. The few of them looked at each other for a long time, and one of them thought for a while and said, "Young Master Su, and brothers, just now at the 4th incense stick, that Lin Yi once wanted to stand up and leave." From his various performances at that time, it was obvious that he couldn't hold on anymore, but halfway through, we don't know why, he sat back down again. Don't you think this matter is very strange? Oh, right. The few of them suddenly slapped their heads. At that time, they had thought that Lin Yi was acting recklessly and coveting points. Now that they thought about it, it was indeed very strange. So I think it's very likely that at that time, the array was already out of our control. Perhaps after that, there wasn't any suppression on his body at all, and that's why he could appear so relaxed. But we didn't notice it at all, and still continued to increase the intensity of the suppression, which caused the array to completely lose control, causing all of us to suffer the backlash. This person summarized and analyzed. Chapter 37:15. Even Su Lingchong, who was standing under the stage and watching coldly, felt that it made sense when he recalled it. Otherwise, there was no way to explain why Lin Yi, who obviously couldn't hold on in the middle, immediately returned to his calm state. So, this time, Lin Yi took advantage of the loophole inexplicably and got lucky? Although Su Lingchong believed this explanation, he was still a little upset. That's true. So this time, young Master Su, you really can't blame us for not trying our best. After all, man proposes, God disposes. Several people sighed. Then why didn't you just ask them to reassess? In that case, we would have a chance to punish Lin Yi again. Su Lingchong frowned and said. He didn't feel anything when he didn't take Lin Yi seriously. Now that he was really thinking of ways to deal with Lin Yi, he was very unhappy that Lin Yi took advantage of the loophole and escaped. Lin Yi was now a thorn in his side. If he didn't get rid of him, his thoughts wouldn't be smooth. Several masters of the law enforcement hall looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Young Master Su, you saw our state. If we don't adjust and rest for a few days, we won't be able to recover. Moreover, you heard what Hall Master Ram said. How dare we disobey him? This time, Su Lingchong had nothing to say. This matter involved a powerful figure like Ram Jia. Even he couldn't do anything. In fact, even if his grandfather Su Yuanzheng came in person, Ram Jia might not listen to him, let alone a young master like him. After all, he was the #1 person in the new generation of the 3 pavilions in the North Island. If he continued to develop like this, it was almost certain that he would become the leader of the 3 pavilions in the future. Even a giant of the Elders' Union like Su Yuanzheng could only politely call him junior brother when facing him. Come to think of it. With young Master Su's power, it's as easy as pinching a bug to deal with such a small figure. Furthermore, their rookie assessment doesn't only have this one segment. In the next segment, wouldn't it be easier to do something to kill him? A few people suggested. The rookie assessment had a total of 6 segments. Strictly speaking, the first segment was the pressure test. It wasn't easy to take the opportunity to kill someone. On the contrary, it would be easier to create an accident to kill Lin Yi in the later stages, especially the second stage. Well said. Su Lingchong's eyes instantly lit up, and he said straightforwardly, the second segment is set to be 3 days from now. The few of you should have recovered by now. Anyway, Hu Yunfeng also wants to find an expert to be the examiner, so I might as well let the few of you make the trip. After all, there is no need to trouble 2 people for the same thing. Good, we have the same intention. The few of them looked at each other, their eyes filled with malice. At the end of the day, it was Lin Yi's fault that they ended up in this state. Naturally, they had to get back at Lin Yi. Su Lingchong nodded his head. Alright, I'll get Meng Jueguang and the rest to discuss with you guys 3 days later. They have deep grudges with Lin Yi, and they have a deeper understanding of Lin Yi's various weaknesses. This time, we must ensure that nothing goes wrong. He had already lost face in front of Shengguan Lena once, and he definitely couldn't lose it a second time. Putting aside the fact that Su Lingchong and the others were gnashing their teeth and planning to deal with Lin Yi, the person involved, didn't care about these people at all. This was the truth. With Lin Yi's true strength and all kinds of trump cards, as long as Su Lingchong didn't take the risk and directly send people to assassinate him, even if he used all kinds of tricks to deal with him at other times, he might not be able to do anything to him in the end. Plus, he had planted 2 spies, Zhong Pingliang and Li Jingming. As long as he could get the information in time, he'd be able to get it. As long as he could obtain information in time, no matter how exquisite the plot was, once it was exposed, it was just a joke in the end. Not long after returning to the welcoming pavilion, Kang Mingming, the rookie deacon, quickly posted the score of the first segment on the announcement board, and immediately attracted a group of newcomers to stop and watch. Some were proud, some were sighing. Some were calm, some were anxious, and it was a vivid performance of all living beings. Since the three pavilions each had their own score, the newcomers only paid attention to the score of their own pavilion. In the Blue Cloud Pavilion, Lin Yi's God-tier full score was naturally the best, leaving Meng Tong in the dust, including the second place, far behind him. Looking at this score and listening to the praise and envy of others for Lin Yi's full score, Meng Tong, who was originally complacent and swore to crush Lin Yi to get to first place, was seething with anger. Lin Yi had 45 points, and he only had 24 points. This was only the first segment, but he had pulled away by 21 points in an instant. Such a huge gap meant that in the next 5 segments, if Lin Yi didn't make any serious mistakes, no matter how hard Meng Tong worked, he might not be able to make up for it. In fact, with Meng Tong's strength in the early stage of foundation building, even if he had just broken through and his foundation wasn't stable, if he didn't get involved in some unlucky incident, he could at least last for 3 incense sticks of time, or even 4 incense sticks of time like Kang Ming and Zhong Pingliang. That way, even if he couldn't compare to Lin Yi's god-tier full score, he wouldn't be so far behind. Unfortunately, there were no ifs in this world. If a person was unlucky, even a sip of cold water could be stuffed in the gap between the teeth, and it couldn't be stopped. Encountering this kind of thing, Meng Tong could only blame his bad luck. Blame Su Lingchong, young Master Su. Even if he had 10 guts, he wouldn't dare to do that. Ninth cousin, you have to help me think of a way, or else it won't look good for both of us if this idiot Lin Yi rides on our heads. Meng Tong didn't have a way himself, and could only turn to Meng Jueguang for help. Meng Jueguang glanced at Lin Yi, who was surrounded by his bitter senior brothers, and sneered, "Why are you in such a hurry? This is only the first segment, and there are still many opportunities to kill him. As long as he dies, so what if he gets more points? Are you going to give the first place to a dead man? Kill Lin Yi? Can that be done?" Meng Tong was shocked when he heard this. Although he had been going against Lin Yi, at most, he wanted to step on Lin Yi to get back at him. He had never thought of killing Lin Yi directly. In fact, not only him, even Meng Jueguang didn't have this idea before. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.